Okay, but this is a test of the system. Brian, can you hear through the things? Our online members, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Good, okay. Good evening, everybody.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. This is the October 14th, 2025 regular meeting of the Mansfield Town Council, and I am calling the meeting to order. Ms. Jane, would you please call the roll?
Coleman.
Here.
Cotton. Here. Kiefner.
Here.
Latrico.
Here.
Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken. Temeko.
Here.
Thank you.
The first item on our agenda is the continued 3 public hearings. You may remember that we opened these hearings at our last meeting, which was in fact the first night of the Jewish holidays. And so in the event that somebody could not participate because they were observant, we left them open till tonight. Is there anybody who wishes to testify at either of the public hearings regarding the amendments to the ordinance of obtaining goods and services, the fee waiver ordinance, or the Willimantic and Yukon sewer budgets? Is there anybody who wishes to address the council? There's nobody in the room. Mr. Aylesworth, is there anybody online?
Not to my knowledge, Mayor.
No, then I will, excuse me, I will close the public hearing. The next item is an opportunity for the public to address the council. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to address the council on any item? I see nobody in the room. Is there anybody online or on the phone or any other way? Seeing none, I will close the opportunity for the public to address the council and move on to our consent agenda. Our consent agenda includes items from the Finance Committee on our proposed capital improvement program adjustments, the alternative plan for people who are not eligible for our regular insurance plan, an easement for the landfill solar array at the transfer station, several appointments to town committees, and the minutes of our September 22nd meeting.
I'll move we accept the consent agenda.
Mr. Kiefner moves. Mr. Coleman?
I'd like to pull item A from the consent agenda, proposed capital improvement program adjustments fiscal year 2025. Move it down to old business, item D.
Item.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's going to be
It would be
item F. Yeah.
Okay. So request is always granted. So we are now voting on the FICA alternative plan, the landfill solar array, the appointments to town committees, and the minutes. Mr. Kiefner has moved the consent agenda. Mr. Shaken seconds. Mr. Coleman? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, we are unanimous. Thank you. And now we move to old business. The first 2 items require us to become the Water Pollution Control Authority. Mr. Shaken.
Thank you. I move that the council recesses the town council and convene as the Mansfield Water Pollution Control Authority.
Is there a second? Mr. Coleman seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Good. We're now the Water Pollution Control Authority. The first item is, well, let's do both items together. The Yukon sewer budget and the Willimantic sewer budget. Mr. Aylesworth, would you introduce these items, please?
Certainly, Mayor. Every year, the council following town meeting adopts budgets for the Yukon and Willimantic sewer systems and sets rates accordingly. Our Director of Public Works, Mr. Carrington, is here to provide some summary information on both items.
Mr. Carrington, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Yukon budget, we're increasing the proposed rate from last year of where is it? $12.97 per 1,000 gallons to $13.22 per 1,000 gallons. It's a increase a little under 2%. Just a reminder, sewer assessments in the amount of $3,717,321 is still being paid off. That's payable over 18 years, but it may get paid off sooner now that we have new construction in the area they'll have a higher assessment based on their unit cost. And it does reflect, this budget does reflect the deficit of $141,920,000, but they'll be replenished with the assessments over the years. That's all I have on
Okay,
One.
questions?
Was that over the year or over the years?
years with an S.
How many years do you estimate?
Right now, I'd say we're probably knocking off 2 years, but I don't
Okay.
have that right in front of me.
Okay.
Would somebody make the motion? Would Mr. Shaken?
Sure, I'd be happy. Sure, I'd be happy to. I move effective today to adopt the FY 25-26 Yukon sewer budget.
Is there a second? Mr. Coleman seconds. Any just further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. The motion has been adopted unanimously. Thank you. The next item is the Willimantic Sewer Fund. And that motion is on page 155. Mr. Aylesworth or Mr. Carrington, who,
I would invite Mr. Carrington to continue with the summary.
okay,
Very similar to Yukon, this proposed budget, it's a 2% increase in user fees. We have a good relationship going on with Wyndham, so I don't see anything worth addressing in this. It's pretty straightforward.
Mr. Shaken, would you want to make your motion again?
I move effective today to adopt the FY 25-26 Willimantic sewer budget.
And Mr. Coleman seconds again. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. I think we are unanimous. Now we need the motion to recess as the Water Pollution Control
Move that the
Authority.
council recesses the Mansfield WPCA and convene as the town council.
All those in said Mr. Coleman seconds. All those in favor? I think we are unanimous again. All right, back to the agenda. The next item on our agenda are the proposed amendments to the ordinance for obtaining goods and services. Mr. Shaken, I believe this comes from finance, so it doesn't require a motion to adopt.
Doesn't require a second, but it does require a motion.
Does require a motion.
Yeah, so this is something that the finance committee discussed 2 meetings ago, and it went to public hearing, and we've continued the public hearing until today, which is why it's on your agenda tonight. Mansfield has long, since for many years, since 2009, had an ordinance that governs how the town staff purchase or otherwise obtain goods and services. It outlines the procedure and process for our staff to go out to bid, what thresholds they must, they have to meet to go out to bid, when they do and do not have to go out to bid, when they have to choose the lowest bidder, when they don't have to choose the lowest bidder, et cetera. It's interesting, this is something that you wouldn't think be established necessarily by ordinance, but our charter has a purchasing agent in it, and the town director of finance is that purchasing agent. My guess is a lot of the basis for some of this stuff existing in the town's foundational documents comes from way back before we had a council manager form of government. But anyway, the staff came to the finance committee with a few proposed adjustments to the ordinance, and you can see them all basically on the 5th page of, on the 4th and 6th page of the ordinance. I'll start with the first part, which has to do with when contracts shall be awarded. There's a provision. This has to do with best value, which is what we sort of deem when the finance director chooses a vendor that might not be the lowest cost. And it outlines a series of reasons why they could choose to do that instead of choosing the vendor with the lowest cost, the bidder with the lowest cost. The things that the committee is proposing to remove from ordinance, frankly, are things that have never happened. And we've done some work. I've done some work and others trying to figure out why they're in the ordinance at all, because as far as we can tell, they've like literally never happened. The town council made adjustments to this ordinance back in 2016, 2015 timeframe. And even though they changed the threshold above which, or they added a threshold when the finance committee was supposed to be informed when these awards were made. There used to be no threshold. 7 years ago, the council weakened the ordinance and added a $10,000 threshold. Even immediately following that, there was no notification, and preceding it, as well as the finance committee was discussing it. We can't find any evidence that this ever came to the finance committee in this way. And also proposing to eliminate a requirement in ordinance that the finance committee get a list of all the vendors whose cumulative contracts are more than $50,000. We've asked to see that list to sort of figure out if that's the right threshold, but nevertheless feel like it doesn't need to be in an ordinance. And then finally, on page 6, we've had a requirement in our ordinance that anything above $25,000 goes out to bid, basically. And instead, we are recommending that that threshold go with Connecticut state statute, which gets changed every once in a while and has an inflationary measure. So we're not stuck at a number and have to constantly change it. And so that makes, we think, a lot more sense. And then that change is, there's a conforming change also makes that same change on the following page. I would say in the committee, we had a lot of discussion. There was some disagreement. I'm sure we'll hear from Councilor Coleman about this in a moment, about the finance committee's understanding or being told about these contracts that might be awarded based on best value. The committee, I think, felt, and I feel as a counselor, that that it's not the council's place to weigh in on the objective decisions of the purchasing agent. There's this entire ordinance that lays out how we make these decisions objectively in the best interest of the town. And I think the committee felt that really the only value that the council could provide in getting these notifications all the time is to sort of politically meddle in these very objective decisions, and say, you know, I don't like this contractor, I think you should use this other contractor, when in fact there's a 7-page ordinance and a lot of other best practices that our finance department is following as they're choosing bids, that eliminate that kind of subjectivity from the process. And so I don't have an explanation for why forever and always since 2009, when this ordinance was originally adopted, this provision hasn't been implemented. I really don't have an explanation for why 8 years ago, when the council amended this ordinance and added this threshold, they clearly discussed this provision. They made a change to it. I don't know why that didn't trigger the beginning of the finance department following the ordinance as it was then amended. But I do still believe that it makes sense to not deal with that process in ordinance. And of course, if there's ever any question about these kinds of contracts, this information is available from the finance department as part of something that our finance committee on the council, this current one or any future one, can adjust. So I'm happy to pause for questions before I make a motion. I know Amanda and Ryan are both here too, and they can answer maybe more technical questions, but that is kind of a summary of the finance committee's conversation.
As a procedural matter, our rules require that changes to ordinances are not made on the day of the public hearing. Do we need a motion? I think it's a 2/3 vote. Do we need a motion to consider this tonight?
I'm happy to make one. I don't know how that, I'm not sure how those rules play into effect when we've had a multiple week public hearing, but I will make the motion nevertheless.
Please.
I move that we suspend the rules this evening to consider this amendment to the ordinance.
Is there a second? Ms. Cotton seconds. All those any further discussion of the motion, Mr. Coleman?
I agree with most of what Mr. Shaken said. I do have a question, about the cumulative contracts that add up
This
to.
is only the question, the motion is just to suspend the rules so we consider this tonight. Do you have any problem with that?
No,
mo-
I do not. No.
Okay.
So,
Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of suspending the rules to allow us to consider this motion tonight? I believe we are unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now to the motion itself.
okay, thank you. I agree with most of what Mr. Shaken says. My question is about the cumulative contracts that would trigger according to the ordinance, would trigger a notification to the finance committee. Is that correct? That if over 50,000 would trigger a notice to the finance committee?
Yeah, so our proposal is to eliminate that language from the ordinance. That's another thing that we can't find. I've gone back and looked at council minutes from 2010, 2009, when the council has received quarterly financial reports. It's something that's common. I can't find any report of this at all, and so it's something that we're not doing in practice, and so we don't think it needs to be in the ordinance.
Yeah. And I was mistaken the way it was done in 2017, but they were running consecutively at the same time as the superintendent's audit. So I confused the exact date, but I honestly think that may have helped in circumstances if a vendor's taking $5,000 at a time and it triggers the finance committee, then maybe it would be a red flag. So I would support the ordinance staying in place.
Any further discussion of the ordinance proposed change? Mr. Shaken, would you make the finance committee's motion,
Yes.
please?
I move effective today to approve the proposed amendments to the ordinance for obtaining goods and services.
Is there a second? Oh, you don't need a second. All right, are we ready to vote or any further discussion? Question from Mr. Temeko.
You're removing that clause from the ordinance, but you're requiring it as a requirement to the committee still, right? Not really changing anything.
I would say that when we had this conversation with staff, what we were told is that it would be extraordinarily difficult. It would require a manual report to do the first part, which is the contracts that were awarded above, that were done on best value. It would be relatively easy to pull this $50,000 report and show it to us. I think the committee isn't sure that $50,000 is the right threshold. I suspect, for example, that the vast majority of contractors with the town of Mansfield hold contracts at or above $50,000. And so we might request to adjust the threshold if what we get is a list of every single contract that the town holds. But yeah, we've asked to see it at least for now, that as a sort of matter of policy.
Okay, thank you.
And I had one other comment that given that at least one of the purposes, let's say there are more than one, of the original ordinance or this original wording was to detect, find fraud. My feeling is it doesn't begin at $50,000. It begins anywhere and begins at $1, but it can happen at $5,000. It can happen anywhere along the way. So I think if there's a suspicion of fraud somewhere, I would expect the finance department to have some mechanisms by which they look at various transactions and frequency and whatever other, variations of perspectives they create. But the second is the committee or anybody else, you can ask it as a matter of FOIA to see any contracts over X amount and find it. So I think we have sufficient guardrails that are practical and would show up if there was a suspicion, and the evidence would be clear.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote on this motion? Anybody have anything else they wish to say or ask? Seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Did we lose Mr. Shuren?
We did.
Um,
He'll be back.
All right, we have seem to have lost Mr. Shurin. Is there anybody opposed? Mr. Coleman is opposed to this motion. All right, next item, the motion is adopted. Next item is the fee waiver ordinance. Again, this comes through finance. Mr. Shaken?
It does. The Finance Committee, let me just start. I move that we suspend our rules to consider this ordinance change this evening.
Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Coleman seconds. All those in favor of suspending the rules? I believe we're unanimous. Okay,
Okay, thank you. The Finance Committee has also made this proposal. I will say this is probably the first of some more extended discussion about our fee waiver program in our Parks and Recreation Department. Essentially, we are proposing to increase or to add a tier to the fee waiver program. Right now, we provide fee waivers to people with low incomes in the town of Mansfield, and we are proposing to create a new waiver for people with slightly higher incomes than are currently included. We use the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD's definition of low income, and we have been providing a fee waiver for people who are making 75% of that income, and 50% we are proposing to add a 25% tier, which, as you can see in the chart, is a slightly higher income. It is still an incredibly low income, but it is nevertheless closer to it's higher than people who are currently eligible for the program. As you'll see in the final attachment here, the participation at a glance, the participation in this program has definitely shrunk since its inception 10, 15 years ago. There are relatively few families in town that participate in it, and that number has gone down. And so we are not spending anywhere near what we've budgeted to spend on this program. We added money to the budget because we made some changes. We anticipated these changes, and we don't think this will even have an impact. And so the committee is going to get some more information about ways that we can maybe flatten this program out even more and make it a little easier to understand what the budget implications of them might be. And we think it is likely that we will come back to the council with either just a recommendation or an ask that the council create a ad hoc ordinance development committee, go to the Parks Committee for their recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. So the motion is, if there aren't any questions, the motion is move effective today to adopt the proposed amendments to the fee waiver ordinance, Article 3.
and they comes from finance, doesn't need a second. Questions of the motion? Mr. Coleman?
No, I'm good.
No? Hey, Mr.
I have
Keithley?
one comment that I think the table that says annual fee waiver program household income amounts should be less than or equal to, should be noted in those. It just says it's this amount, and it does that in all three columns. Or it should be, maximum. You could label the whole thing, but it doesn't indicate that that's the cap.
Thank you. That's a very useful suggestion, because at a very quick glance, I couldn't figure it out myself. Any further questions?
I'm sorry, I made an error in explaining this change. Just very briefly, we provide this will add a third tier to the level of fees that we waive. We currently provide a 75% fee waiver, so a resident would be responsible for 25% of the cost. For people who are extremely low income, which is a HUD term, it's a term of art, 50, and that's what's in the chart, a 50% fee waiver for people who are very low income. We are adding a 25% fee waiver for people who are low income. And then we have a 100% fee waiver for ambulance fees for anyone who's at the 75% level. So this is one of the things that I think the committee is concerned about, is it's kind of complicated to understand. And so we increased I think last year we increased the total cap that you get as a family. You're capped out at a certain amount, which is why there's more money in the budget, but we're not spending that money either. And so we don't think there's going to be a huge budgetary impact to adding this, but we'll hopefully open the program up to more people.
it is in effect a sliding scale of fee waivers for increasingly lower,
Yes.
so that the lowest and people get the highest fee waiver, and what people who approach median income in some way get a lesser one.
Correct. And in true Mansfield fashion, it is the fairest possible way to do it, but also the most complicated.
All right, so the motion is on the table. Are any further questions? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. I believe we are unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Mansfield Community Center Insurance Supported Memberships. This is one we've been waiting for a very long time. I cannot tell you how happy I am to see this on our agenda. And I do want to say that this is an outcome which was very strongly desired, but we did not believe it was possible until we actually threatened to withdraw from Silver Sneakers. And our intention was serious and was taken seriously, and the insurance companies have come to the table. It's made a huge difference in our ability to support this program and to provide services to seniors. Even though it is not to seniors as a whole, it is to only those seniors who are retired state employees or whose insurance programs provide this particular benefit. So it is not one of the things that people have been really concerned about is that our actions might appear to be discriminatory in that we didn't care about senior citizens. That is definitely not true. We have always had a very strong interest in providing services and care for our senior members of our community. And of course, seniors range in age and in income and in interest. And as you can see from those of us on the council who are over 65, and there are quite a few of us here, we all have different needs, different interests, and different insurance programs. So I'm very glad that we can continue this one, which serves a certain segment of our senior population. And it would be really nice if all the insurance companies provided the same kind of benefit, because we would be a healthier community for it. In any case, Mr. Aylesworth, would you present the final plan and where we stand and how we got there, whatever you deem appropriate?
Happy to, Mayor. So I won't recreate the whole history that I did at the last council meeting when presented you all with information on our negotiations with the other insurance supported membership vendor, that was Optum and their new active program. But just briefly, as you alluded to, when we did the comprehensive master planning process for Parks and Recreation and the financial sustainability strategy, it was identified that the level of revenue that we were collecting for our participation in the insurance supported membership programs that we've been talking about was declining over time, in large part because those terms and conditions were not being adjusted to reflect inflation. So as costs went up, revenues were pretty stagnant. And during COVID, of course, revenues went down when participation and visitation to the community center went down. So as you alluded to, Mayor, the difficult decision was made not just to ask for a better deal, but to actually go through the process of having the council vote to sunset our participation, the town's participation in those two programs effective at the end of the calendar year. And taking this decisive step did indeed bring both vendors to the table to have a serious negotiation with the town for the first time about a successor agreement with financial terms and other terms that were more advantageous and mutually agreeable to both the town and the vendors. So last meeting, the terms and conditions with Optum for a new active were unpacked. So in this case, we're just talking about Silver Sneakers, and Tivity, of course, is the vendor for Silver Sneakers. Just as a quick reminder, we've been accepting Silver Sneakers at the community center for about 11 years. 2014 was when that program was initiated over at our community center. And from that day and every subsequent day, the per swipe rate was set at $3 and the monthly cap set at $30 respectively. So over 11 years, obviously with inflation, the value that the town gets, that $3 per swipe and that $30 monthly cap, meaning after the 10th swipe, no additional money to the town, that's been held flat. And when we adjusted for inflation going backwards, curious what that value in 2014, what would that dollar amount have to be in 2025 to be the same? The answer is $4.14 per swipe and $41.40 monthly cap. And so armed with that information and the seriousness of being willing to discontinue participation in the program, we've been negotiating with over many weeks now with Tivity, and Tivity has agreed to a 50% increase both in the per swipe rate as well as the monthly cap. So increasing $3 to $4.50 per swipe and increasing the monthly cap from $30 to $45. So as you can see, based on the inflation adjusted numbers I just provided, that actually puts us slightly ahead of basically the monetary equivalent back in 2014. So this represents a slightly better deal than we were receiving in 2014 when we first signed up for the program. We're also projecting that with this 50% increase, both in the monthly cap and the per swipe amount, it'd be essentially a 50% increase in our annual revenue when compared to our current reimbursement model. And that puts us ahead of what we budgeted for with sort of our best educated projections of where we would be at membership wise for the current fiscal year if we sunset the program effective January 1st. So basically on all fronts, this is a winner. It's a better revenue outcome for the town, not just based on or compared to the current agreement, but also based on what we projected our revenue to be if we discontinued participation in the ISM. But also puts us on a much more equitable footing moving forward as we negotiate subsequent agreements. Last thing I want to say is for the first time, this is a multi-year agreement, 2.5 years. So typically we've been doing year-to-year agreements. And so the reason why the council and the motion proposed by staff or presented by staff here differs a little bit from the Renew Active motion last meeting. Town attorneys advised us that multi-year agreements require council authorization for me as town manager to enter into them, whereas I can enter into a year-to-year agreement basically at the administrative level. And so contrary to or in contrast to the last meeting where all you did was you rescinded the previous motion, you're doing two things here. You're rescinding the previous action to discontinue participation in the program, but also authorizing me to enter into this new proposed successor agreement, which again, advantageous in all fronts.
Thank you. This negotiation was held up by some fine details. What were the holdups on the contract?
Yeah, honestly, there were. I don't want to. It probably sounds anticlimactic, but we had reviewed and done a red line markup of basically what amounted to the latest version of the document. The parties that we were negotiating with, Tivity, I guess you could say they were programmatic experts, but they require, just as we would, their legal counsel to do final sign off on a number of the, whereases, that sort of thing. So it wasn't that we anticipated any problem, but simply their legal review took a heck of a lot longer. And so that's what unfortunately delayed it getting put on the council agenda for the last meeting, was simply Tivity's legal counsel review. Once they finally did that, we didn't have to settle for anything less than we had previously negotiated. So,
thank you. I saw Mr. Shaken's hand first, and then Mr. Coleman.
Thanks. I have a unfortunate question. So the change that caused the program to have issues beginning now 7 years ago was the state's renegotiation of its collective bargaining agreement with its union collaborative, and that affected the retiree healthcare that state employee retirees receive. It added a Medicare Advantage plan that included this vendor, that continues to include this vendor for Silver Sneakers. That was a 10-year agreement in 2017, and it's taken us frustratingly 7 years to get to a positive resolution with this new vendor. But the agreement does expire in June of 2027. And so I guess my question is all of this, what is your feeling about what happens if the state again renegotiates the benefits that its retirees receive as part of its new, then its next CBAC agreement, and we have to start fresh with a new Medicare Advantage provider and a new Silver Sneakers program. I'm assuming Tivity is not the only game in town, and that there are other Medicare Advantage plans that other retirees that aren't state employees enjoy that have different vendors.
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, and I think I am, so in a scenario where basically before this agreement expires, there was another major shift in terms of this cohort of people, this group of retirees that we're talking about, that in mass, they started essentially receiving a different benefit program, one that we don't currently accept. I believe the short answer is, we would obviously be responsive to that and review whatever that new vendor, that new program was, and need to consider potentially an agreement with that vendor. This would simply mean that I guess we would effectively ride out the number of people participating in the program. Silver Sneakers might essentially evaporate to the extent that there was still some. We would potentially, I'm not presupposing any outcome, but continue to offer that to them. It just would be we would need to examine whatever the new program was and figure out what we could negotiate with that vendor for similar terms.
Let me ask the question in like a slightly different way. I think that's a good answer. But for years, we've been told, until we did, as the mayor said, okay, we're done. We have to negotiate, or we can't participate in the program, and that caused the negotiation. For years, the vendor told us, this is the deal. You're not getting a special deal for Mansfield. This is the deal we give to everybody, period. So take it or leave it. And so we finally left it, and then their tune changed. Is it your understanding? Do you have an understanding of whether we are now getting this very special deal that no one else in the country might get for any Silver Sneakers program here, such that if there were a shift like I've described in a few years, we would have to go through this all over again? Or is it more, or do you think it's likely that we'd be able to take, or possible we'd be able to take this agreement and sort of duplicate it with other vendors?
I mean, without obviously disclosing what my, proposed or preferred negotiation strategy would be, I think, obviously another vendor, if they did their research, could certainly find out, because this contract is being approved now, so it'll exist, it'll be a known thing. Whether we told them or they did their own research and found out what our current reimbursement rate was, I think it's reasonable that both parties would kind of say, well, we're looking to not have the sand shift from under us, and we're looking to continue this. This is sort of a revenue model that we're comfortable with. We negotiated this. We think it's reasonable for us to try to continue on in this without upsetting the apple cart and having residents that currently receive a benefit now with a new vendor not receive any benefit because we don't participate in it. So, can we pick up with you, whoever the you is, this new vendor, and basically, locks up with where we're at with Tivity? I think that's a very logical possible starting point, but obviously the world changes and economics change. And if inflation was absolutely through the roof in a way that was historic in a year and a half's time, because we're locked in at this rate, I wanted us to overshoot basically the inflation adjusted rate because we don't know what inflation is going to be over the next 2.5 years. So if inflation was through the roof, maybe we would use this as an opportunity to try to negotiate a higher per swipe rate or a higher cap than we did with Tivity. A lot of what ifs there, but I think certainly it would be a logical jumping off point for a negotiation with an alternative vendor.
There are quite a few member unions of the CBAC organization that have employees in the town of Mansfield. CSEA, AAUP, CSFT, AFSCME, SEIU, all of those organizations have active chapters within the borders of Mansfield, and they are all on the CBAC board. We also have really good connections with the comptroller who's on the state side of the negotiation. It seems to me that those leaders all ought to understand exactly what has happened here, so that when the discussion comes up in the negotiation session, that all of the parties understand that Mansfield is different because of the very high percentage of retired state employees in our community, and that if they really want this program to provide wellness to their retirees, they're going to have to maintain the exact same kind of arrangement. I think if we fail to get those negotiators on our side, we could really have some trouble. But I think that's a really important thing to do, and probably we should do it. We should ask for a meeting with those unions as soon as possible to make it clear to them exactly what has happened. I don't believe either the firefighters or the police unions are part of the CBAC coalition, although Yukon Police and Yukon Fire are represented in that coalition. Mr. Coleman.
Congratulations, slick move. You got them to the table. But you describe it as a defensive move. This kind of indicates to me that certain people were in the know ahead of time on what was going to happen, and certain people were not in the know. Me
I don't
being
think
one
that's
of
true, Mr. Coleman. I don't think that's true at all.
listen to what you said earlier. Okay, you obviously said this was a plan, and it was a defensive plan. It's something that you executed, and you went, and you're taking credit, and you're proud of what you did.
Well,
And I wasn't in the know, and I believe that you were in the know. So
I was not in the know. The town officials were not in the know. I assure you that there were two factors at play. One of them was a very deep concern for maintaining tax rates and for filling the hole that the community center has been generating over the decades. And it was a taxation and finance issue that drove us to this decision to withdraw. And it was a total surprise when that decision brought the insurance companies to the table. And it was a ploy that was unintended as a ploy, but it sure worked as one. So I assure you, nobody was in the know in advance. Because several of us had discussions with members of the negotiating teams on both sides and had no luck whatsoever. Mr. Shaken.
Thanks, Mayor. As someone who was on the finance committee, who when the Parks and Rec department came to us before COVID and said, hey, we thought this was going to work. We did all this marketing. We did all these financial assumptions because we thought we would actually increase business with this program, but we're losing our shirts on it because of the terms of the contract agreement, and we need to figure out how to fix it. We're talking 6 years ago now. So now I suppose you could believe that there was a 6-year conspiracy on behalf of the town council to get an insurance company to the table for a negotiation. But I will, I guess, simply remind my fellow councilors that that when we have disagreements about policy decisions, we don't impugn each other's motives, character, or integrity. We take what each other says as fair value at fair value and in good faith. And I can't possibly understand how someone would think it would be a smart political move to make a wildly unpopular decision, as this was, either to propose the wildly unpopular decision that staff proposed and took a lot of heat for, or to take the votes to make it because of the fiscal reality that we were facing, only to change our minds, when in fact just saying no to the original decision would have caused us to be heroes. How that is somehow a better decision, but that's the allegation, I suppose. It seems like a pretty far-fetched one to me.
Mr. Coleman.
just so you understand, the community center is not fully subscribed, and we weren't really losing money to begin with.
Oh, yes, we've had to fill the budget every year.
If it was fully subscribed and it was taking the place of other memberships, I would agree with that. But that's not the case.
Well, you can't go out and round people up. You offer them opportunity and they take it or leave it. And this staff has done all sorts of innovative and interesting things to offer introductory offers and to welcome people, encourage people to participate on a regular basis. And sometimes it's worked, and it's worked with some people, but it hasn't filled the financial hole. So that's the problem. Mr. Kiefner.
Yeah, I just wanted to say relative to a couple of the comments here that, we're all seeming to be happy, at least in the financial aspects of this. We're now getting the $4.50 and saying, oh, great. And that's getting us above inflation. But we got to remember, this is Mr. Shaken, a piece of what he mentioned. We've been behind the game for many years. And so while we say, oh, yes, we're ahead of the game right now, and maybe next year, we've been behind for a long time, and it's probably never going to be made up. So I don't think we need to be, slapping ourselves on the back a whole lot about this. It's great that you're happy with it. I'm glad that it worked out. I know there are constituents that think this is important for, so I'm glad it's happened. But let's stop being so self-congratulatory and just move on. And I see it as an opportunity in 2.5 years to relook at this and in a serious way again and say, hey, do we pull out or not? And I think our members who are the Silver Sneaker, et cetera, members need to know that this is not a guaranteed forever program, that when it is not appropriate for the town, that the town really needs to act on in its own self-interest and protect itself financially in the community center.
And I think the other side of that is true also, is that we may need to reevaluate our philosophy of funding the Parks and Recreation Department so that we don't have what appears to be a deficit. We may need to support the institution of Parks and Recreation, including the community center, at a higher level. That's something we will need to discuss. So I'd like to move on to the motion. This comes from Finance. Mr. Shaken, would you please make the motion?
It doesn't, but
Oh,
I'd be
it
happy to
doesn't.
make the
Okay,
motion
sorry.
anyway. I move to rescind the town council's, actually, I think someone who, I was on vacation during the June 23rd meeting. And I think because this is a motion to reconsider, I think someone who voted in favor of that motion on June 23rd ought to make the motion procedurally.
I think Ms. Cotton is ready to do that.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to rescind the town council's June 23rd, 2025 vote to discontinue the Mansfield Community Center's participation in the Silver Sneakers Insurance Supported Memberships Program effective December the 31st, 2025, and authorize the town manager to enter into the proposed successor agreement for the period January 1st, 2026 to June 30th, 2028, subject to the newly negotiated terms and conditions as presented.
We have a second. Mr. Kiefner seconds. Any further discussion or questions?
No, I'm happy that this is resolved.
Me
Yeah,
too. As a Silver Sneakers member, in particular, I am happy about it. All right, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. I believe we are unanimous. Thank you, one and all, and a special thanks to the staff that worked so hard to get this to happen. So, and who braved the wrath of all the state employees over 65 in this community, who many of whom showed up in one way or another to express their displeasure with what they had recommended and we had done. All right. So the next item on our agenda is the item from the consent agenda, and that is the capital improvement program adjustments.
Mayor, can I just make a procedural question? I think Mr. Coleman made a motion originally to move it to new business, and you said old business, and he said, sure. I think this should be new business, however, not old business.
Okay, so it's item D under new business. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the new business, the first item is the acceptance of the FEMA SAFER grant. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. The town has applied for funding. This is a FEMA grant program. SAFER stands for Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. We have applied several times in the roughly 5 years that I've been here. It's a very, very competitive program. And honestly, when we applied this year in the council back in June, at staff's request, provided the authorization to apply again. Didn't necessarily think going into this that our fortunes would be different because, again, despite the fact that there's a lot of incentive to do it, the result has not been particularly good over the last few years. So that said, we received notification back on September 24th that we'd been awarded the grant. As a reminder, this would fund 4 additional full-time firefighter EMTs. We have, with the current year's budget, we're presently staffed for 24 full-time firefighter EMTs position. That's in the 25-26 adopted budget. And so this would bring staffing up to 28, basically 1 for each of the 4 duty groups. And important to note, though, that this does not give us, if you want to call it the luxury, but does not allow for us to roll this into, when it comes to local match, into the next full budget year. It's basically a situation where we need to mobilize the funds, free up the funds for the local match component immediately in the current budget year that we're in. Unfortunately, because of some staff transitions, some vacancies, there's been budgetary savings in the department staffing line anyway, so we have a way of doing that. And then, of course, we just need to build it into our budgeting. If the council accepts the funds and wants to move forward in this way, need to build it into our budgeting process for FY27 and beyond. So basically, the program, if we accept the funds and we move forward, it's a 5-year time horizon. So we receive funding for 3 years. It's not quite as lucrative, if you will, under the current program guidelines or criteria as it used to be. It used to be you had essentially 100% of the staff costs covered for 3 years, and then you picked up 100% for year 4 and 5. You're required to maintain the staffing for 2 full years after basically the grant funding stops. So that's why it's years 4 and 5. Starting with this year's cycle, it's no longer 100% for 3 years. It's 75-25 split, 75% covered by the grant, 25% local match for the first 2 years. And then it flips to 35-65. Town funds 65%, the grant funds 35% for the last year. So there's definitely town skin in the game. That's important to note and to, accept. It's also really important to underscore, though, and I know, Chief Roach, both during his annual update as fire chief, but also during the budget process, talking about staffing, talking about the projected future needs of the town, getting to this 28 full-time staffing level. If you set the grant aside and just say, when would we want to get there? The answer is this essentially would enable us to slightly expedite deployment of that staffing level beyond what we would be doing in the absence of the grant. So it's not getting us to a staffing level that wasn't the department's target, didn't have my support, or wasn't part of the council's vision. It just allows us to expedite that by a couple years. Allows enhanced ability to staff 3 stations, whereas right now we're staffing 2, and we're utilizing one station basically to garage apparatus, but is not staffed 24/7. So I think that's sort of the short of it. The chief's here, can obviously answer any questions the council has, but staff would strongly support the council to authorize acceptance of the funds to move forward with the enhanced staffing as outlined.
Questions for the chief or for Mr. Aylesworth? Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. So this is great. We've applied for this grant frequently, and this is the first time that I can remember that we've gotten it. And so I guess my first question is, pick a time horizon, 5 years, 10 years, in terms of, I know it's complicated with part-timers, but also with, changes in the volunteer force, but in terms of like full-time equivalents in the fire department, we're going to be at 28 plus chief and deputy chief. So 30, plus
fire marshals,
plus the fire marshals. where were we 5 years ago in terms of full-time equivalents or 10 years ago? How much have we grown the department now?
Well, I can say, so when it comes to.
And I see Maria's here typing feverishly, so maybe she
I'll-
might be able to answer the question.
Well,
in
I'll
a second,
say,
Dave.
when it comes to, so like the firefighters are part of the union. So when we say like the 28, that includes captains and that's would be inclusive of captains now with this projected new staffing. When I started 5 years ago, we were at 16. So it's a 75%, would be a 75%
You're at
increase,
16,
16,
we'll be at 28 now.
28.
And then if you, okay, so that's good enough. 5 years ago, we've done a 75% increase in terms of full-time staff in the department. So my next question then is, I understand this allows us to do this staffing model in a way that we haven't been able to. We've never been able to do a 7-6, but even when we were on 5-4 or 6-5, we've always been sort of on the lower number of those because of the challenges with our part-time workforce and making sure that they're available. So do you anticipate that this, once we get up to the staffing level, will reduce our need for part-timers, A, and then B, we've had also overtime costs associated with keeping the department staffed at the levels necessary, so 6 or 4 or 5, whatever it was. Do you anticipate that being staffed up to here will have an effect on overtime cost?
The short answer is yes. The more complicated answer, which I was planning on having more in-depth discussions with the council, is the fire department currently does not have a minimum staffing contractually or anything like that. So right now we've got the 24 positions. We're trying to get at least 5 on any given point in time. Again, remember, you divide any of our positions by 4 because we've got the 4 different rotating shifts. So for every 4 full-timers you add, you actually kind of add 1 person to the floor at any given point in time. So right now we're budgeted for 6 people at any given point in time. With basically we've been unofficially at a 5-person minimum. The discussion that we would have with the council is, do we want to continue with the 5-person minimum, or do we increase it to a 6-person minimum or 7-person minimum down the road? And when that makes sense, but we're not locked into having to upgrade. Just because we're taking the SAFER grant doesn't mean we have to upgrade to a 6-person minimum or a 7-person minimum. So if we kept it at 5, you would definitely see a reduction in overtime. If the council decided after conversations that we want to go to a 6-person minimum because we like what that does for apparatus and staffing and getting the stations opened, then it may actually increase the overtime slightly right now, given with what we have for staff.
And right now with, I don't know if you have the 24 filled right now that we've budgeted for, if you've managed to get the 2 new positions filled.
We unfortunately, it's a cycle. So we hired 2 that are in recruit right now. And while we've hired those 2, we've had 2 leave.
Right. So if we were staffed at 24 and nobody was out, that means that you would be operating 6 on a shift, which would allow you to fully staff 2 stations with kind of an extra person, 3 in each station, but not 3 stations because you don't have enough for enough people to.
Correct. So
right.
part of that also is we've always got an on-duty shift captain, which we like to keep in town. We don't want to put him on an ambulance and send him out of town to transports. So we always keep that captain in town available. So yes, we have 6 on duty, but it would be a captain plus 5.
So I guess my question is, when we get to 28, when we accept this grant, we're now going to have, if everyone's in, 7, 6, 2 per each station plus the captain, so enough for 3 stations. When we get to the appropriations, we're going to talk about getting Eagleville back up and running, and some septic improvements and whatever. And so I guess my question is, you feel confident at the moment operating with 5 people on and 2 stations, 5 or 6, that you're covering the town safely without Eagleville operational, or most, as safely as possible, which is safely, we're getting to calls on time, et cetera. If we got to 28 and then the council said, yeah, we should try for 6 on at minimum at all times, 7 if we can do it, but then you have an event where you have a couple people leave and some people are out on leave, like, are we immediately saying, okay, we've got to backfill with overtime to get to 6, or are we saying, okay, we could flex down to 5 like we did back in 2024 and 2025 and keep the department operational until we have people back online?
And I think that's definitely something that the council can do. And we're kind of doing that right now, because on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, we actually go to 7. Because we need to have basically we need 3 ambulances running. Or we need at least 2 ambulances and a fully staffed engine available in this community. So because of the call volumes of those periods, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, we have actually been bringing people on either part-time or overtime to make sure we get to 7. So this will actually help us eliminate and alleviate some of that.
All right, my last question has to do with our volunteer program. Maybe I'm mistaken about this, but I'm not aware that there's another community in the state with 32 full-time firefighters who are also trying to operate. How successfully they're doing that or not is an open question, but trying to operate a volunteer fire department as well. And so I guess I don't take this the wrong way, people who are out there who like volunteering for the fire department. Do we need one? And if it's nice to have one as a nice way for community to get engaged, if you like having extra personnel and other roles, et cetera, what's the cost that we put in when we have volunteers that come forward? Like, what's the cost we're spending in time and otherwise in recruitment? And then particularly once we get people, what are we spending training folks who are on the way to getting certified, only to have them in many cases become certified eventually and then take a job as a full-time firefighter in another department?
Yeah, so our volunteer corps here is kind of unique. We've got kind of like 4 or 5 different kind of groups of volunteers. We obviously have a number of volunteers that have been around to the department for 30, 40, 50 years.
Right.
They're great assets to have. They know the town, they know the community, not necessarily interior firefighters, but do come down and help and drive trucks and pump the trucks and free up one of those interior firefighters to go inside. So those are great resources to have. We've got a number of volunteers that are fire police. They basically do traffic control for when a tree and wire comes down. It allows us to free up the fire truck and the fire crews so they're not sitting there for 4 hours waiting for Eversource at 2 a.m. To get out there. So we've got those volunteers. We do also have a large number of our volunteers. I would say probably over 3/4 of our volunteers are UConn students that already came to us with their EMT certification and are looking for ride time for patient contact hours. They're nursing students, PA students interested in exploring medicine or different public safety careers. And so that's an opportunity that we give them. There's very limited cost there because most of them already have their EMT cert when they come in the door. So it's mostly just they're becoming a 3rd person riding on the ambulance. They're not substituting for the career staff right off the bat. Though if they've been around long enough, we've got a couple of them that have gotten to the point where they're cleared. And so if they are at the station, it does actually allow us to take one of the crew members and free them up. So if there's a medical call, they don't have to go on the ambulance. And then we've finally got probably, I don't know, maybe 4 members that would consider your true typical volunteer fire department firefighters, that local members that live in town, that are interested in learning fire and EMS, and we are investing in them. But it's probably about $1,500 to get them firefighter 1 certified. If they stick around again, firefighter 2 is another $1,000. But we've got 4 of those at max right now, 2 of which already came with firefighter certifications from other towns. But I think that's a great feeder pool. We use them to kind of test the water, see how we like them, see how they like us. And in the past, historically, a lot of those people that have come up through that program have ended up becoming career staff. And we just closed, we're in the process of closing the applications tonight. And those 2 of the 4 that I just mentioned applied for full-time positions. So, and it's nice knowing the person, having worked with them, they know the town, they know the equipment. We've got a good background working with them for the last 6 to 8, 10 months. So I think for a recruitment retention program, I think it's actually a pretty good feeder program without being a tremendous cost.
Ms. Cotton?
I just had a really quick, just a simple question to make sure that I understand. This grant requires that 4 people be hired within 6 months. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Can we do it?
Yep. So we luckily, well, for better or worse, we knew that we already had the existing openings because of the people that left for retirements. So we've already posted the planning. The plan is to post the closings tonight. We're already working with Maria's team in human resources. We've already worked up lining up the testing companies to the beginning of November. Interviews will probably be mid-November to beginning of December. Make offers that point in time, and we'll hopefully get them in here by the beginning of February.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
My question has to do with the money. This is a very attractive grant because they front load it with a lot of cash. But by the end of the 4 years, we're left with $500,000 budget increase. It won't be a full cost of $500,000, which we will have built up towards, so it won't be a shock. But would you have been asking for 28 firefighters or 32 firefighters all along, even if we didn't get this grant?
Yes, I believe when I came and presented the last time at the council, I said the long-term 10-year plan is probably going to be 8 per shift. So that way, when you have somebody off, we can actually have 7 per shift here. But that was probably the 5. I said that wasn't going to happen day one, but 5-10 years down the road, where did I think we were going to be? I think we're going to be at 8 full-timers. So that way, when somebody takes a day off or a time off, we still can have 7 without having to do overtime and backfills.
Okay. Are we ready to take a motion?
I can read the motion if you'd like, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Coleman.
Move effective October 14th, 2025 to accept the FY 2024 FEMA Safer Grant Award. Further, to move to authorize the town manager and their designee to execute all the grant-related documents and the grant agreement as approved to form. Further, move to appropriate the funds as presented.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Kiefner. Any further discussion? No questions, no further discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, we're unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is a project which we have been anticipating for a number of years, because I think this was our 4th application, was it?
I mean, the time that I've been here, it's been an
Yeah.
annual tradition to apply. So I don't think it started with me necessarily. I think there might have been a few years hiatus, but yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay, congratulations to you and to the fire department, and we look forward to meeting our new firefighters. All right, on to the next item, which is the Shared Services Division Annual Update. And this is Ms. Capriola and Mr. Russell and Mr. Poseco.
And Ms. Backus.
Oh, and Ms. Bacchus, please.
I appreciate Sarah Ann trying to create a diversion with some. If only we had an IT director here to race over and help.
Well, welcome. These are all the people you call when you have an emergency, other than the fire department.
All right, so briefly, a couple things. One quick housekeeping thing. So Maria and team, I can give you the keyboard and mouse. You can advance your own slides. The only thing that also requires you to take full custody of is, as needed, and you might not need to, but as needed unless you allowed space for it in all the slides, moving the closed captioning box. If there's always an empty space, you can just leave it in one spot and never touch it. This is something I often do for guests, so they don't have to worry about it. So okay.
Yeah, do it.
All right. So okay. So you're gonna tell me to advance slides, and I will try not to get ahead of you. All right. So every year you guys hear from you receive a department's annual update. So this is more than a department; it's several departments. It's all the departments that comprise our shared services division. That division, of course, was created in the last few fiscal years when we did a little bit of reorganization. Appreciate the council's support in doing that, and creating this Chief of Shared Services Administration position, which I was successful in luring Maria back here to occupy, and she's been doing phenomenally well, as is her team. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Capriola to introduce herself, introduce her team, and I will try to do a good job advancing these slides.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. I am so proud of this team, and I'm so grateful to work with just such a talented group of folks. I'm going to let them go around and introduce themselves. I think you know most everybody, but
Members of our watching audience may not.
I'm Amanda Backus. I'm the Director of Finance.
And we stole her from Coventry, and they are not forgiving us.
I'm Michael Pasacco, Director of Facilities.
Jamie Russell, Director of IT, and back in 1999, you stole me from Coventry.
It's an interesting group because we have a very long-term employee who took 5 years away, a very long-term employee who's been here all along, and then two very new people. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much. For this evening's presentation, we know that we don't have any newly seated council members since we did this last year. So primarily this evening, we're going to focus on sort of what we've been up to for the last 12 months. But just for a quick overview of our shared services here in Mansfield, we actually provide shared services to 6 different entities. That's very unusual for Connecticut, but we have a long history of that. It's worked very well for us. So in addition to the town, we're also providing services to the Mansfield Public Schools, to Regional School District 19, to the Eastern Highlands Health District, and also through contract, we provide services to the Downtown Partnership and the Mansfield Discovery Depot. So as I indicated, we do have a very long history. Some of our shared services now go back nearly 40 years. I do like to credit Marty Berliner, Jeff Smith, Bruce Silva, and Gordon Schimmel. They were so visionary about this in the 80s. We were doing this long before anybody else was really doing this in Connecticut. And frankly, there still aren't a lot of communities that do this. We're now about one of 10 communities in the state that share, for example, finance with their boards of education. So just a lot of credit goes to the vision that those individuals had in the 80s. Finance goes back to the early 80s. Facilities management goes back to the 1980s. That particular service, though, we do not share with Region 19. That is town and schools. The shared grounds and vehicle maintenance began in the 1980s. Similarly, we provide that to all of our entities except for Region 19. That's typically covered under Public Works. Shared employee benefits and risk management services, which Ryan and I provide out of our office, goes back to the mid-1990s. And we consolidated IT in 2007, and Jamie has been with us through that entire initiative and is still our first and only IT director for the shared department. And again, this culture of just sharing services now is just really pervasive in an incredibly positive way throughout all of our organizations. We spoke about this in the past, but there's so many benefits to the shared services model. Reducing redundant systems, having shared expertise in-house, economies of scale in purchasing and staffing, and collaboration on mutually beneficial initiatives. Some of the examples, we often share during Local Government Academy have been during times of incredible, just budgetary constraints and difficulties. For example, when we lost an incredible amount of pilot funding from the state after the collapse in the housing market in 2008, or the very serious, budgetary challenges we had in fall of 2017 when the state couldn't adopt a budget. It was wonderful to be able to work in partnership with our boards of ed, working together to find solutions, proportional shares and reductions, right? Whatever we needed to do to maintain our quality services for our residents, not competing with each other, not fighting with each other for resources, but working in partnership during those difficult times.
And during the pandemic.
And the pandemic. All right, and we're going to turn it over to Amanda.
Thank you. As Director of Finance, I oversee 3 departments: assessment, tax collection, and shared financial management services. The assessor department is responsible for valuing all property within the town of Mansfield: real estate, personal property, motor vehicle. Our tax collector's office is responsible for billing and collecting for all of the different revenue sources we have. This includes tax collection, sewer use, garbage, and other miscellaneous billings. And then shared financial management services provides an array of financial and accounting related services to the 6 entities that Maria had identified. So this slide goes deeper into the role of what our shared financial services does. I'm not going to read all of these, but just some highlights. My office processes all of the accounts payable. That's any payments to vendors for goods or services we've received. For fiscal year 25, we processed over 12,000 invoices. So that keeps us very busy. We provide payroll services. A normal payroll week includes over 800 part-time and full-time people, and that number goes up in the summer when we have our Parks and Rec employees. We are responsible for financial statements. We prepare quarterly financial statements for the town council. We also do that for the other 5 entities. You're all familiar with our budget process. In addition to doing that for the town, we again do that for all of the other 5 entities. And then my office is responsible for the annual independent audit for the town, Region 19, and Eastern Highlands Health District. And then just areas of focus for the last 12 months. The town did receive the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. This year, we received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the town and the region. This was a big deal. The region had not received that award since fiscal year 17. So that was a big accomplishment for us. All of our audits were unmodified clean opinions. I participated in training webinars for new board members through CABE. We implemented a student activity module in Munis. And then we are looking forward, we're looking to amend purchasing statutes, which you approved this evening, implementing an electronic timekeeping system, and we're reviewing our electronic payment processing vendor. So that is what finance has been up to.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you guys tonight. On this slide, I just have the mission statement for IT, which truthfully is true of all of these departments, that all four of us approach our work with kind of three key points highlighted in red there. Is that one, we work really hard to be efficient and cost effective. We recognize that any cost savings we can achieve then get funneled back into citizen services, and also any efficiencies that we can help departments achieve provide more service to citizens. Second, we approach our work with high quality. We see it as that we're serving a customer. That customer might be citizens, it might be elected officials, it might be community members, it might be partner agencies, but we want them to receive the best. And then finally, superior customer service, that we not only solve what their need is, but we do it in a way that they feel respected, feel good about it, and kind of build on that relationship moving forward. Just by the numbers to give you a sense of what IT is, it has grown a tremendous amount in the decades since we consolidated. As you see up there, I'm not going to read all of those pieces, but just to give you a flavor for that, we operate throughout the town. In the case of Eastern Highlands, we also operate in neighboring towns. Because we serve staff and students and community members, we have almost 3,000 individuals with formal accounts with us. We have a significant amount of bandwidth going through, and our website that's accessed by the public is very popular. And also we get a lot of usage of our public access, which is sometimes Wi-Fi, where people bring their own device, which can occur in up to 20 locations. And also we provide PC terminals, recognizing that some members of the community either might not have a device or maybe aren't comfortable using their device. And that's kind of a way we can serve not only internally, but also externally as well. In terms of what it looks like, it is definitely not just your traditional PC on a desk. Many, many years ago, that's what it was. Now it actually frequently looks like a lot of different things. So I'll highlight a few that are up there. In the upper left corner, that item that sort of looks like a smartphone is something we're moving forward with in partnership with the Human Services Office and also a number of departments, where we're going to have portable translators at some of our public facilities. So that way, when individuals come who maybe English isn't their primary language, we've got a translator ready. In the lower left corner, I alluded to Wi-Fi. You'll also notice the on the air. We stream meetings every week, including the council. But in addition to the council meetings, typically there's anywhere from 10 to 30 different public meetings or internal meetings being streamed. In the center there, we work a lot with Parks and Rec to provide access to items. In this case, you see an individual participating in a Park and Rec program doing digital art. Most of that is not your traditional, again, sitting in front of a PC, zoning out. It tends to be items like this, where the individuals work in collaboration, they're talking, it's sort of engaging back and forth. We've worked a lot with departments on public things where we're kind of reducing screen time. We've been doing a lot of hands-on things with robotics, for example. And then moving to the right, you see we do provide all the telephones, website, and then we work closely on cybersecurity issues, for example, with the registrars of voters. Some other things in terms of, as I alluded to, a lot of the technology is mobile now. Our inspectors, our individuals who go out in the community, we outfit them either with a tablet, a smartphone, a laptop. That way they can engage the public right then and there. We're trying to reduce the time that someone has to wait to find out about things. We also work a lot with infrastructure. That's the kind of thing that we plan long-term and appreciate the CIP budgets that you approve each year to ensure that we're maintaining that infrastructure. There's constantly a push-pull in terms of as the demand increases, we have to build up our infrastructure and budget accordingly. And then the last two to just highlight, a lot of our work is cost containment and supply chain. We work with every town department on their procurements to find out how we can get consortium contracts, best pricing, where we can qualify. Sometimes we benefit from having the education side. We can leverage education pricing, and also security and risk mitigation, that cybersecurity component. And then finally, some areas of focus from the last year. Facilities has been a big piece, as you know, because you've been involved in the work. There's been a number of projects, whether it's the middle school entrance, planning for the pond, Fire Station 207. You may be aware E.O. Smith had some facility projects. Technology is always now embedded in those projects, whether it's the technology that facilitates the HVAC system or the security system or the cabling that allows people in terms of how they work or telecommunications and so forth. So we play a big role right from the beginning. We work with the architects, we work with the planners to make sure that we're identifying what's a cost-effective way to build in modern technology, not just for today, but for the future. Kind of recognizing that all of our departments, and I do mean all of them, rely on technology in their work. Cybersecurity has been a huge component. This past Friday, for example, we had the opportunity to attend. The state had a cybersecurity conference down at Central Connecticut State University. We worked with other member towns and school districts. It's an ongoing thing. It's constantly evolving, but we want to make sure that we are keeping our citizens' data safe and also keeping our operations up and running. Technology use, we collaborate with other departments, work hand in hand. They bring content expert, we bring IT expertise and collaborate. And then the final two that are there, cost controls, which I had mentioned, and then software conversions is a big piece. We've been working with departments not only on required conversions, but also thinking through things like AI, which is artificial intelligence. All right, Maria.
So I will just point out in regards to HR and risk management, you may recall in the earlier slide, the employee benefits and risk management component was consolidated in the 90s. So there are certain items on this list of what we do that we do provide services to all of the entities. Some of the services we provide to just some of the entities, but primarily we do classification and compensation work. We do recruitment and retention of staff. We do labor relations, so things like negotiating and implementing union contracts, employee benefits administration. And again, this is something we do for all the entities in the pool. That could be things like health insurance, pension administration, things of that nature. We take care of employee training and development, policy development and compliance, and risk management is sort of a catch-all for our safety work and initiatives, administration of our liability automobile property policy, our workers' compensation claims and policy, as well as contract review. It feels like Ryan and Amanda and I have been doing a lot of contract review, just updating leases and getting our various contracts with our vendors, working closely with Attorney Deneen and just really getting those in good shape. So again, areas of focus for the last 12 months, we had negotiated and implemented successor collective bargaining agreements for both of our CSCA groups. So that is the majority of our employees in the Public Works group, as well as many of our employees who are characterized as professional or technical. We've continued to focus on recruitment of staff, just again, really getting back to our basics of running very efficient processes, but also finding and vetting quality candidates. We've been bringing back a lot of training and development initiatives that have been well attended and appreciated by staff. We've also been working on updating a number of our personnel and administrative policies. We have done quite a bit of work on some of our benefits plan administration in the last last year. We got a little bit of a surprise in the fall of last year. Anthem, our longtime carrier for decades, for what we call retiree supplemental medical insurance. So that's essentially Medicare supplemental plans, told us they weren't going to do that anymore. They told us and many other municipalities in Connecticut that they weren't going to do that anymore for January 1st. So we worked very closely with our benefits consultant. We found actually a plan that's slightly better than the Anthem plan through the Hartford and at about half the cost for our retirees. So that was just very successful. And we implemented that for January 1 of this year. Similarly, with our dental insurance plan, we had what's referred to as a legacy plan through Anthem. And as providers were retiring, selling their practices, Anthem wasn't adding back providers to that plan, to that network. So we also had to implement a new dental insurance plan. That was for, again, all of our entities, and we did that for January 1 of this year as well. Like our private sector counterparts, we needed to implement the revised Connecticut paid sick leave law this year. We assisted the Mansfield Discovery Depot with updating their pension plan and their pension plan documents. At the council's request, we had researched FICA alternative program history and options. And in doing so, we received advice from our pension council on that item that you approved tonight, which was that for decades, we think as far back to the early 1970s, our FICA alternative 457 people and our voluntary 457 people were commingled in the same plan. And it was recommended that we separate those two plans out. So thank you for that earlier this evening. We've also been busy. Some folks may be familiar, they may have heard of Secure 2.0. So there are essentially, the IRS is requiring us to make some amendments and updates to our 457 plans for January 1. So we've been working on that. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been very busy with contract review.
Thank you, Maria. And you left off all the support that you provide me as a new director, and I'm sure this whole team. So thank you. Thanks for taking the time to learn a little bit about our facilities management department. We are made up of custodial services. We have 20 custodians on the team, as well as a custodial supervisor. They're responsible for cleaning, disinfecting, and minor maintenance of all the school and town buildings. We're responsible for approximately 650,000 square feet, excuse me. And that's a total of all of the school, town, and even some of the parks and rec facilities that we support. We have a smaller maintenance team made up of 4 trade licensed individuals, and these folks handle all of the preventative maintenance and equipment repairs and support some of the project work we do as well. And we have a large project schedule and a small team to support that with a one project manager, myself as the director, and an assistant director that also support the projects as well as the maintenance and custodial teams. These are some of the projects that we've completed over the last year. Some highlights I think it was the pool. That was a really great learning experience for me as a new director. It was a little challenging and I'm sure frustrating for folks, but it was a challenge and process, and I think I learned a lot in that process of kind of remediating and resurfacing the pool. And just ensuring that situation doesn't reoccur. A number of town facilities received air conditioning, which is nice. The town hall, senior center, as well as the daycare facility. There's some renovations that took place at stations 207, 307. We replaced the septic system at the library. There was a number of smaller projects at the schools with locker painting and floor resurfacing at the middle school, notably the water system completion at the elementary school, and some sort of completions of some of the lingering projects from the larger building project. So it was nice to get a lot of these wrapped up. Some of the projects that we currently have in progress are a couple of larger projects at the middle school with improvements to the main entrance. You'll see that main entrance canopy to start to take shape over the next couple of weeks. A lot of the exterior concrete work has been completed, and we'll see some paver installation over the next few weeks as well to really wrap up the exterior work, hopefully before the cold weather hits. We have some that's fine. We have some HVAC work also happening at the middle school, which will bring air conditioning to the 3rd floor and gymnasium. That work began early September and has been moving right along on schedule and so far on budget. So with no real anticipated interruption to that. So far so good. And we're preparing an update for the HVAC committee early next week. We also have some improvements to the old town hall that are wrapping up. We've made a number of improvements already with roof replacement, total site drainage, foundation repointing, a number of structural repairs, and most noticeable, the exterior siding and window replacement. We do have a few things remaining with completing the ADA restroom, ADA entrance at the rear of the facility, as well as parking, followed by landscaping in the spring. Some of the future projects we're working on, planning and designing, have been the Bicentennial Pond bathhouse replacement. The project really includes a number of accessibility improvements, as well as some improvements to the space as well, which are hopefully obvious from the renderings. It's really designed to better support the needs of the camp at Bicentennial Pond, as well as the pavilion rentals that take place there throughout the season. We're also planning improvements to or really a replacement of our animal shelter. The need for replacement is really driven by new regulations that are cause for increased animal enclosure spaces, and our existing animal shelter facility is basically at the end of its useful life. It's very tight, undersized by current standards, and we're looking to bring that to current standards.
I think that's your last slide.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's just amazing how much work you guys do. Mr. Shaken and I have the same question. When are you going to make registration at the community center a smooth and effective and functional process?
So, the recreation staff and our department and everyone and so forth does team with, we use RecTrack, which is a vendor. There aren't a lot of vendors, to be honest with you, that offer that kind of software. We do kind of talk to other towns, what they use. We do hear that frustration expressed from everyone. So we continue to kind of give them feedback, try to push them to make that process smoother. But agree, it is not where we wish it was. So
it certainly wasn't this year.
So
I wonder if in that situation you just said we try to push them, if you might try to lead them. It's not a specialty of theirs, clearly. It is one of yours, at least the pool is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's frustrated people for years.
I think that's a good point. That lead is a better word than push. I would agree. And we can, I think, continue that path. I think kind of our approach is we are not just pushing them, but also providing concrete suggestions. But I think your point is well taken, that it really is more of a leadership. Here's what we think you need to do specifically. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, thank you.
So other than that personal gripe, I just really wanted to compliment all of you on the really fine and amazing work that gets done. Anybody else have comments or questions? My goodness. This shared services program obviously is a leader in the state. I mean, every time I go to conferences, there's somebody talking about Mansfield's shared services program and trying to persuade other towns to adopt it. I was recently at a group of chief elected officials that were talking about, I think it's Rocky Hill that's beginning to do some shared services stuff. And I just gloated. So, oh yeah, we've been doing this for years. Don't worry about it. It'll work out. So it's a tremendous idea, and you guys really work together beautifully. I will say that during the pandemic, while I was monitoring what the town was doing, the ability of our departments to work together to share resources, responsibilities was truly amazing. And I think that this program has really had that kind of an effect. It made us able to respond to unexpected emergencies in ways that many other towns will just flounder with. So I'm really glad to see you all, and please keep up the good work. So, anybody else? No? Well, I think probably I have had the opportunity to observe this group working closer because of all the committees I've served on, and because of the work that I was able to do during the 2020 and 21. So believe me, this is a wonderful service that we provide. Yeah.
I will say one more to Jamie about you pointed out the three principles, and I have appreciated and enjoyed that. And the few times I've gone in, it is the routine, it is the culture, and it's great because you don't feel foolish. You feel like, oh, okay, how can we make this work better for you? And it was great. You were one of those people, and I've had others of your staff help me in a similar way. It's terrific.
Awesome. Thank you for saying so. I appreciate that very much.
And that said, I would also say I felt the same way. And this is, I'm the complainer in terms of how the town staff handles things. And I would say that, my experience with each of your areas, although you haven't been in your personnel office much, but there's just a pleasant attitude, even though you're not supposed to go into the finance area. They've been polite at trying to restrain me. So thank you.
Good. Just thank you so much for that kind and positive feedback. Jamie and I have talked about this, since we both have been with the town, for decades. And something that we love about Mansfield is we said that our team, we feel like it's how do we get to yes, right? Like how do we find a way to get to yes, right? For our organization, for our community, and working together as a team. We joke a little bit sometimes it's almost kind of like almost Pollyanna-ish, but there's just this wonderful spirit of collaboration that is just so ingrained in the work that we do here. So it's wonderful to hear that that you all are feeling and seeing that as well. Thank you.
I also want to say that the image you had of the computer wiring didn't do justice to what was there. I mean, that was a very simple wiring. I have looked in those closets where there are literally hundreds of wires all going in the correct place, and that is amazing. During the school construction project, I heard one of our consultants saying that if they ever had any problem, they would go to Jamie because he's as good as any expert that they brought on board. So, and Mike, I just haven't had enough chance to work with you to make the same kind of a comment, but certainly, and we know Amanda's work very well because of the finance committee. So, again, thank you. So with that, my computer turned itself off, so I have to go back. So additional appropriations, Mr. Shaken, this came from finance this evening, I gather.
No, not this evening, last week. But why don't I have Ryan and Amanda introduce both of these items, and I'm talk a little bit about what the finance committee discussed on them.
So I guess just briefly, and I'll invite Ms. Backus to add any more details she thinks are relevant. So the one item that was pulled from consent deals with adjustments in capital project lines. Every so often, looking at these lines, we see that there are projects for which basically the project has been completed and there's unexpended budget because for a number of reasons, the project came in bid under what was expected, things like that. And then there are also projects for which additional funds are needed. And so finance will periodically propose adjustments, moving available funds from that project line, which has available funds, to a project line that needs additional funding. And so that is spelled out in pages 38 and 39 of the council packet. That's the agenda item summary for the proposed capital improvement program adjustments for the end of the last fiscal year. And then similarly proposed additional appropriations for FY 25 for which, so basically just very briefly, we again ended FY 25 with a strong surplus. Surplus was a combination of a couple different things, as it typically is. Our budgeted revenues or actual revenues coming in over budgeted revenues, and then our actual expenditures coming in under budgeted expenditures. So on the revenue side, we were roughly 1.3 million in excess of budget, and on the expenditure side, a little over $900,000 in savings. So that contributed to a surplus of approximately 2.3 million. And the memo that Ms. Backus sent to the Finance Committee through me provided a little more detailed summary of those expenditure drivers and revenue drivers that the Finance Committee was briefed on at its last meeting. All that to say, where this culminates is recommendations from staff that council would be considering tonight, and Finance Committee has already reviewed. Additional appropriations, basically a half dozen different items, some of which will be no surprise to the council because we kind of discussed them back when funds were originally transferred, that they would be backfilled. That would be staff's recommendation, i.e. Replenishing $800,000 in CNR funds for the South Eagleville Road Pedestrian Safety Improvement Project, as well as $193,000 in replenishing road resurfacing capital funds that was also transferred to help with the South Eagleville Road Pedestrian Safety Improvement Project once that project went out to bid and we knew we were short on available funds. And then a handful of other new ones or newer ones that haven't maybe been discussed as much. The cafeteria at the middle school, it's long been desired to renovate that space. And while a firm project budget doesn't exist yet, we know it'll be substantial. And so we're proposing $650,000 of the surplus be earmarked for that project with a recognition that there will be additional funds needed. So it's kind of a down payment or an installment toward that project for future years, as well as covering an operating deficit of $100,000, additional $100,000 for parks and recreation. We did project a deficit for FY 25. So this is to help close the deficit, basically where the actual deficit was a little bit more than was budgeted. Looking to institute an electronic time and attendance solution. It's kind of comical in the year 2025 that we're doing things by paper and Excel spreadsheets and passing paper around for wet signatures from people. It's inefficient in every possible way. Something can be inefficient in the year FY 2025. And so we're trying to improve upon that, rush into the modern era with this system. And then Fire Station 107, the Eagleville Fire Station. It's kind of a curious case, if you will, with the septic there in terms of where the septic or components of the septic system exist in terms of not being on land owned by the town. But there's been a large crack identified in the septic system, and at a minimum, the tank needs to be replaced. At this exact moment in time, we don't know for sure. It's a 70-year-old system. I think we figured out it's original to the building 1952. So it's been there a good long while. It's probably long surpassed any useful life whoever installed it would have thought it was going to achieve. But that brings us to present day. The tank is failing, needs to be replaced. The leaching field, setting aside the number, the age of it suggests it probably is due to be replaced, but it won't be until additional exploratory work is done once we have contractor in the field that we can do some additional scoping and testing and figure out whether or not the leach field also essentially absolutely needs to be replaced. So what we have proposed for $45,000 is a quote unquote, hopefully worst case scenario, all in cost, replace the entire system. But just as we do with any project, the actual expense or outlay would be based on what the final determination of needs are. So could end up being a little bit less than that. Last thing I'll say on the septic is, while the future of the fire station in terms of our using it as a fire station is very much up in the air, and in all likelihood, we will certainly, you can anticipate staff recommendation that we move forward with alternatives for a third fire station that does not include that station because of the capital needs the building has. Whether it's an alternative town use, like another municipal department uses that space, or the town considers parting with the property and selling it to a private interest for whatever that private interest might do. In all cases, a functional septic is going to be needed on the site. So it wouldn't be, good money after bad, so to speak, in terms of investing now, even if the town's interest in the facility is relatively shorter to midterm in nature. So I guess I'll stop there. Oh, last thing I would say, just want to point out there was a slight error, page 226. If you do the math, you'll probably know what we did, which is when you subtract out the proposed total use of fund balance, the additional appropriations in the amount of 1.862 million, when you subtract that away from the roughly 2.3 million projected surplus, you're actually left with a residual of 429,000, not 241 as stated in the packet. The percentage though is accurate. If 429,000 became fund balance because it was not used, we would be at that 17.6 level fund balance as printed in the packet. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, Mr. Shaken.
So Ryan kind of breezed over them a little bit, but went through the, excuse me, the appropriations recommendations in some more detail. We have again experienced a significant surplus in the town's budget. And so the finance committee, I think, spent some of its time, most of its time talking about some of those drivers. It's sort of I'll just say the finance committee is trying to figure out with staff as we continue to go through our budget process, what we can do about this. I will say, I've said this before, this is a good problem to have. Certainly would rather have this problem than the opposite problem of coming to you every October and saying we're short $2 million from last year's budget. The challenge as you page through the agenda item summary and you look at the expenditure drivers and the revenue drivers, is that any one of these things taken individually, I think should be, we have been as a council hard pressed to change or to budget more accurately. So take our interest revenue as an example. We're $626,000 over budget in our interest revenue, and there's a chart in your packet that shows the last 6 years of our interest revenue, and you will see that as interest rates have increased in the market, so has our revenue. We earned 0.03% in 2021, and we earned 4.75% last year. However, the year before that, 2024, we budgeted to earn a lot more money because we knew interest rates were going to stay high, and we doubled that number. And same thing this year. We didn't quite double it, but we budgeted even more money this year, and we've earned even more than that. We have continued to anticipate, as we read the newspaper, that there will be rate cuts and that these interest rates are going to go down, and they keep not happening. Essentially, last year we had a whole conversation about us entering into a recession. That was widely reported. You might remember the last election and how that was part of the conversation. We were definitely going to have a recession. The interest market was going to go down. Everyone's mortgage rates would go back down, and it didn't happen. And so my savings account is still earning this amount of interest, and so is the town's. We don't have we can't go to the stock market. We're required by state law to invest in a fixed rate, no risk savings account with our assets, and we're just earning a lot of interest. And so as an example, this is one of the things we talked about. There is one other option we have, which is to investigate other slightly more predictable investment opportunities. Amanda has experience working with a tiered, sort of laddered certificate of deposit CD system where you, instead of working with this state operated fund that we're in, where the interest rate has been very favorable the last few years, but we don't have prediction powers over it. We can ladder our funding into CD investments and have a much more accurate sense in the future of what our interest income will be. Similarly, the CCS grant, we budgeted conservatively because we thought we were not going to get this one-time money again from the state. It was given to us, maybe not exactly in error, but not on purpose in the state budget process. We were sure they would correct the mistake. They have not. And so we received an additional $657,000 there. There's a couple of areas that account for together $1 million of revenue. The property tax sale and the ordinance violation penalty collections. The tax sale is something that we decided to do mid-year. It wasn't part of our budget process. We had not done one in a decade, so we really didn't know how it would do, and it did very well. This is a method to get delinquent taxpayers to pay their taxes. Otherwise, the town will put their property for sale, essentially, and it was super successful. We're going to do them more frequently, but we raised $770,000 from it, which is really substantial. And then we had a fluke, essentially, of being engaged, I think, in a long-standing dispute with a multifamily property owner in town related to housing code building safety violations in their properties that went to court, and they were being assessed fines for a period of time before the issue was resolved. The council will recall, we've had some conversations with our attorney and with Mike Ninto about that case. But as that was going through the process, we collected several 100,000 times what we normally collect in ordinance violation penalties. Something that there's no way we could have anticipated. And so I'm saying all this to say that while the number that we continue to experience in surplus is the committee has really acknowledged is a challenge, and it's something that we really would like to get a better handle on budgeting wise. We are looking for creative solutions, I think, from staff as they develop next year's budget for how we can actually drill into some of this detail and do a better job budgeting. I will say in Ryan's defense, he very much does not want to have to come to the council in a subsequent fiscal year and say, look, we guessed wrong and we're really short money and we have a situation here. And I wouldn't want to do that either. So the other thing that's just to mention that we've asked, we always have this cushion of staff salary money. We budget for every position to be filled from the day that we authorize the funding, typically July 1st, but not always. But that never happens. We just authorized $120,000 or so in the fire department that we can spend because people have left, and the time in between when someone leaves and when you fill the position, there's always time and there's savings there. We're not a big enough organization to really accurately predict this by department, but we've asked staff if they can try to figure out a way to more accurately predict it organization-wide based on our experience in existing departments, so that maybe we can create a buffer in our own budget. We can remove some funding that we fund every year with the assumption that not every position will be filled every single day, every year, and it will allow us to free up more dollars that we would otherwise have to tax folks to spend, so that we can not have this issue in the future. So I think I accurately covered the bulk of the conversation that we had. The last thing that I will say is the first two items on the additional appropriations, $800,000 to replenish CNR and the $193,000 to replenish road resurfacing. You'll recall we knew in May that we were going to experience a surplus. We didn't know exactly how much, but we knew it would be at least $993,000. And so we pre-spent it, essentially. We had this conversation on the council several months ago to fund the pedestrian safety improvements on South Eagleville Road, which needed to go out to bid to be done this construction season. And so or needed the contract to be signed to be done this construction season. And so that is replenishing the funds that we already moved out of those funds before the end of the fiscal year. And so that is sort of the second step to what we had all agreed, or as a body agreed to do several months ago. I will make the motion if it's needed, but I'm happy to wait for questions too.
Make the motion, please.
Okay, move it effective today to approve the additional appropriations for FY 24-25 as presented by the Director of Finance in her correspondence to the Town Manager dated October 8th. And that came from the Finance Committee.
Wait a minute, I'm obviously on the wrong page. The additional the agenda summary.
Nope.
No.
There's two items you need the.
Okay, but what is this one?
You clicked the wrong.
Ah, okay. All right, doesn't need a second. Comments on this, Mr. Coleman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are we going to have any further surplus this fiscal year?
Back with FY 26, the fiscal year that we're in,
Yes.
I would anticipate a surplus, sure.
Yeah, okay, so I talked to you about the animal control facility. We set aside $2 million for that, and then you said that we were going to have a surplus to cover that. Where is that coming from? I know this may be a little off, but it has a lot to do with a surplus.
So I guess trying to recreate the conversation about the animal control facility. When we were going through the budget process in the run up to town meeting, we talked about how there are a number of avenues, if you will, for which that project with an estimated all in, design, permitting, site work, everything. Hopefully worst case scenario, 2.5 million. That there were a few different possible funding avenues, which like essentially the funding for that could be achieved, including the possibility that the town would bond for all or a portion of the amount needed, and that would be done obviously through a customary referendum process, but that and I believe I'll probably get this wrong. My understanding is that essentially, I'm not sure if it's a legal requirement or it's just a good budgeting practice or both, but I believe I was told that in order, again, whether it's required or just a good practice, that ideally to hold the option for the referendum to include this funding as part of the budget process, that basically it should be sort of outlined, disclosed, shared there, and then that would preserve the option for, again, different avenues for funding, including pursuing grants, including additional sources of state funding through an earmark, including possible a private benefactor that wants to help underwrite the cost. There's a number of different ways where this particular project could get funded, but also cash on hand, surplus funds available, funds in our capital and recurring fund. These were a number of different ways, given the overall price tag, if you will, that we thought we could potentially fund this project.
And I thought during the budget season, we discussed that we were going to have a referendum on November 4th this year.
Yeah, so definitely nothing
we're not doing
decided.
that
I mean,
this year.
there's a whole process that the council would have to go through, and obviously information leading up to it about, setting any referendum and the need. So there definitely wasn't any commitment or obligation made to fund it a particular way. It was just understanding that one potential means of funding the project could be through referendum. Historically, the town has, I don't know if always, but I'll say it's a tradition to do the referendums to coincide with the November election, but you can also do a referendum you could do a spring referendum if you wanted to. So there definitely wasn't a commitment made to A, go to referendum for the project, or B, a particular, month or year in which that hypothetical referendum would happen.
Okay, but we did put $2.5 million aside for
No.
the fund.
Can I answer the question? So
I've got the floor, sir.
I'd like to answer your question,
wait.
Mr. Coleman.
Wait. Mr. Coleman, you have asked a question and Mr. Shaken would like to answer it.
Sure.
Go ahead.
During this budget, we reserved space that we did not fund with appropriations in any way for the construction of the animal shelter. That's a necessary thing to do in order to fund the project at a later date. So the budget that passed at town meeting, the budget that passed at the referendum that was held on the budget said, we're going to do an animal shelter. It could cost up to $2.5 million. What Ryan just explained is that there are multiple different ways that the council could decide to try to fund that project, one of which is to ask the people of the town to approve a referendum to issue bonds, to borrow money to build the building. We are not proposing to use any of the surplus from last year to pay for any portion of the construction of that building. That is not in the proposal for these additional appropriations.
I do have an email that states otherwise from the town manager.
The motion that I made tonight that the finance committee has making to the town council does not recommend to spend any money from surplus
I
to
see
pay for
that.
the
I
construction
see
of the
that.
building.
That's play. All right. The question I asked if we were anticipating more surpluses this year. Okay.
So again, we're dealing with the surplus from last year. This is the
Right.
fiscal year that ended on July 1st. We're closing the books on that
Right,
fiscal year
right.
after the end of the first quarter. I don't know anything about a surplus for this year. We just approved our first quarter financials. So we're a quarter of the way through this fiscal year, or any of the potential uses for any surplus that we experience in the current fiscal year.
Okay.
That's not on the floor right now.
Thank you for answering the question.
And my assumption is that almost all or a big chunk of this surplus comes out of additional state funding, and we won't know that until next May
Okay.
or June.
All right. I can go along with the CNR $800,000 and the $193,000. We made that commitment back in May. I am a little concerned about the cafeteria renovation at $650,000. Where's that money coming from? Is that taxpayer money or grant money?
So Mayor, May.
Mr. Shaken, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, the purpose of this, there is a corresponding additional revenue item from the state for education funding of $657,000. The council technically gets ECS money as general revenue, and we can do whatever we want with it. Legally, as a matter of practice, we try to spend education cost sharing money that we receive from the state of Connecticut on education. And so this is what we think top end, hopefully, the renovation of this cafeteria could cost. And so it's taking a revenue source that is meant to fund education and finding a one-time capital project in our education system to spend it on. We have no idea what the cost of this project will be. There hasn't even been a preliminary design done. There's been no funding for the food services department to do this work. We do know it needs to happen. We are hopeful that it will not cost $650,000 to renovate that space. I will add, there was an email that Ryan sent to the council earlier today with some extensive information. We had a conversation in the finance committee about, hey, look, it seems like we're doing a bunch of one-off renovation projects at the middle school. It's a facility that was built in 1969, so it's aging. Are we not doing the right thing here? Should we be looking into a Renovate as New, going to school construction grant, getting, essentially building a new school for the amount of money that we're piecemeal putting into different parts? And that's the detail. That's why Ryan answered that question in that email, because the detail shows no, for a variety of reasons, that's not the financially advantageous position for the town to be pursuing either a new construction or a Renovate as New grant for the state for the middle school. It's better financially for us to tackle renovation projects there on a sort of one-by-one basis.
Okay, so the town is looking to pursue a Renovate as New for the MMS?
No.
Okay, all right. These are heavy expenditures outside the $800,000. We're going to be talking budget in less than 5 months here. I would like to see this go in the general fund and then come out during budget season for a vote by the taxpayer.
Mr. Shaken, it does seem to me that the projects that will be funded by these additional funds would normally have come out of our capital projects money. Is that correct?
We have this question every year. When we talk about, we usually fund these additional appropriations as with capital expenses because it's a one-time revenue. It's not something that we would fund an ongoing expense with. The way I would answer your question is that if we did instead what Mr. Coleman is suggesting, which is that we took $2.3 million and put it all in our general fund and did not touch it, let it earn interest for another 6 months or 8 months, and then funded the projects that we want to fund today as part of our budget process, that it would have the same outcome. What I would say is for most of these projects, with I think the exception of the cafeteria renovation, all of these projects, and I guess the exception of the cafeteria and the electronic time and attendance solution, these are things that we need to do now. So we just said we're going to hire 4 firefighters in 6 months, which means that we are going to staff the Eagleville Firehouse, where we just discovered you can't flush a toilet without the poop going into the ground, not into the septic system. And that's probably been the case for a long time. Nobody knew where this septic tank was. It's not on our property. It dates back to the original building. As someone who's bought a house with a septic system, you often don't inspect these things until it's time to inspect them, and then you discover the crack. Anyway, it needs to be replaced before we can allow anybody to use the bathroom in that facility. If we are going to, within 6 months, have firefighters on duty and reopen that facility as we're going to do, we need to be able to flush the toilets there. So like that is a project, for example, we would need to do today, as is replenishing the funds that we moved out of CNR before the end of the fiscal year. I think you can make an argument that says we shouldn't touch these other projects until next June 1st, and we should spend this revenue in April instead of now and just put it in the bank. I don't think there's a significant reason to do that. I think if we didn't do this, these things would be in Ryan's proposals for capital improvements in March, and we would be making these determinations as we do our budget process. We have the revenue now. It doesn't make sense to not do projects that need funding now, and instead delay them in another 8 months and delay the final completion of the projects even longer.
That was kind of the point I thought I was getting to, and that is that these are, we have money that is not in our original budget that will allow us to spend money on capital projects that are needed to be done without taxing the taxpayer for them, without raising taxes. Is that correct?
That's how I look at it. I think you could also look at it and say, I think if you looked at it in the other way and did this as part of our budget process, it would have the same outcome for the taxpayer. It wouldn't necessarily cause us because of the reasons I just outlined, talking about each of these different revenue and expenditure drivers. It would not cause us to feel comfortable budgeting to receive or to spend less money in these areas because of the how volatile those sources of revenue or expenditures are and how unpredictable they might be. And so it would be irresponsible for us to say, we're going to make $2.1 million in interest next year when the Fed has again said we're going to cut interest rates, for example. And so it wouldn't have a different outcome for the taxpayer to delay these projects and not spend the surplus until next April. It would only delay the projects.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Ms. Cotton?
Just a little clarification for myself. So if we were to delay them by 8 months, then we'd be going out looking for contractors, looking for engineers, looking for bids. Prices don't seem to be going down, they seem to be going up. And so if we can satisfy some of that now, it would seem to be more cost effective than even in 8 months. Or am I misunderstanding?
Mr. Shakin?
No, I think you're correct, and I'll just add, after this budget year, we asked in future budgets for the town manager to include the kind of wish list of capital projects that didn't make the cut. He gets a long list of things that each department wants to do, and he doesn't present all of them to us in his recommendations. And so because of things like this, we asked, look, in the future, can you tell us what you would have done if you had an extra $2 million so that we can at least know what is coming if we experience a surplus? And I think that will help deal with some of these questions of like, hey, why are we putting money aside for the MMS cafeteria when we didn't include it in our budget in the future?
Okay. Any further questions? Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, my concern really, with the 650,000, you really didn't designate that actually came from a grant. And our town charter requires the 650,000, if it comes from other sources other than a grant, probably would violate the charter.
No, other than if it comes from other sources than tax revenue.
Correct, but some of this is tax revenue, and you have not designated that. Or is
It's
it
not from town tax revenue. It's from the state.
Yeah.
These are grants from the state, which we can expend.
Some of it is from savings from tax revenue. Employee benefits is less than 104,000. That's taxpayer money, correct? That's not grant money.
That's an expenditure, Mr.
Yeah.
Coleman, not a
Yeah.
revenue.
You know, but not all of this is grant money, correct?
So again, when we get 11 or 12 million dollars of state funding for our education system through the education cost sharing grant. That's how the state pays for its portion of public education in every town, and our town included. Because of how it comes to the town, we're not actually like obligated to. It doesn't go to the Board of Education's bank account and then they spend it. It comes through the council and its budget as a revenue. And so it obviously is necessary for us to pay for education. If we spent it on, we didn't give it to the school system and cut their budget by 12 million and spent it on paving roads, it'd be a problem. But when we get extra revenue from ECS, which happens from time to time and happened last year, it's been our practice as a council, even though we're not required to do it, we could just recognize it as revenue and do whatever we want with it. We've tried to find education-related capital projects to spend that revenue on because we feel like it's a policy decision. It's a value judgment that we've made. It's really just because state intended for this money to be spent on education. Plenty of towns would spend it on something else, but we've made the decision to try to spend those dollars on education over the years, and that's the recommendation. It's not like we applied for a grant and got a grant to renovate the cafeteria. It's not that. It's
No, I could support this motion without the 650,000. The 650,000 go in the general fund.
Which 650,000 are you talking about?
cafeteria renovation there.
The cafeteria renovation will go in the general fund until the next budget season. We'll take that as a friendly amendment when we make the motion.
It is not a friendly amendment. No, you can move to amend the motion, but it's not friendly. So it will require a second.
Yeah.
Happy to second it.
I think I see where Mr. Coleman is going. Under expenditure drivers, taxpayers have paid the 504,000, the 104.7, and the 247,000. That is has all come out of money paid by taxpayers. To reallocate that money, there are percentages that have to be. Ms. Backus.
Thank you. On page 3 of the memo, it starts out outlining the additional appropriations that would be made. These include interest income of 626,000, education cost sharing 650,000, and prior year tax collections of 586,000. That could easily be amended to clarify that the education cost sharing money is specific to the MMS cafeteria project.
Yeah, that's not stated in this.
That would be fine to make if that's amendable.
Otherwise, you'd be breaking the charter.
I would agree with that.
That's okay. So that's, man, that is how I understood it to be in the finance committee meeting. But if Mr. Coleman's concerns can be alleviated through that.
I can
change,
add that into the memo, yes.
I'd still make
Good.
the suggestion to put it in the general, the 650,000 in the general fund. But go ahead and make the motion.
Mr. Shaken has already made the motion to
Okay.
accept the Ms.
Mr. Coleman
Bacchus.
made a motion to amend the motion.
And I
Chris
seconded it.
seconded.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
motion on the floor to amend it.
Now, wait a minute. Ms. Bacchus has already said that one of the possibilities would be to change her memo, which is the motion on the floor with plus there's an amendment motion on the floor. But she has suggested that she will amend her memo so that the cafeteria renovation would be paid for entirely by excess education grant money. Does that solve your problem?
I would like to suggest that the 650 be put aside until the next budget season.
Okay, so this is your motion, which
Right.
would be an amendment. Anybody have any questions?
I'd like to make a comment. It's effectively what's happening anyway. We're not ready to spend the money, the $650,000. It's going to go and sit in the general fund, correct? So it's really not changing Mr. Coleman's not proposing a change from what we're already not planning, but actually doing.
My point is, I'm sorry, may I speak?
Yes, Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, my point is it creates more transparency during the budget season. The taxpayer has a vote on it. Because we're talking a lot of money here that's flying out the window and that we're all making appropriations for. And really the taxpayer doesn't have any say in it. That's my concern.
Mr. Shaken?
I appreciate the concern. I think we've just had a conversation. I don't agree with it. I don't. I think it is something we could do, but the effect ultimately that it would have on moving projects forward that the taxpayer will ultimately be asked to fund in whole or in part, whether we count this revenue towards next year or not, is to just delay the projects. I will, however, quibble significantly with the assertion that anything in this motion whatsoever has any bearing on the charter. The charter states, notwithstanding the foregoing, which is our limitations, the foregoing is our limitations on expenditures without a town meeting. Council may approve appropriations without limit, as to amount if such appropriations are to be funded from revenues other than receipt of taxes or proceeds of borrowing, etc. None, not a single one of the revenue drivers that caused this surplus, which is the receipt. The expenditure side is not part of this. The revenue drivers, the $1.3 million in excess of revenue that we collected, none of them, not a single one, are taxpayer revenues. They are not receipts from tax collections. And so the council is in its full right, as it does every single year, to authorize appropriations without limitation per the charter, funded by revenue sources that are not tax revenue, whether or not the appropriations that led to 934, the expenditure drivers that were funded with taxpayer revenues were saved. That whether we didn't spend, all that matters is the source of the money that we are spending, not the fact that we didn't spend money in vacancies or et cetera. That part is immaterial, and that has been the council's practice for many, many years. I think Mr. Coleman's point is that he would rather a project such as the middle school cafeteria be funded through the regular budget process. I appreciate that. I think the effect of waiting until the budget process to do it is that the middle school will not be able to begin the design process until next July, when this money would allow them to begin that design process now and would allow that project to proceed more quickly. It's a project that needs to proceed more quickly than that. And so I do not support Mr. Coleman's motion to remove this project from the list of additional appropriations, which is the motion that he made, not to just effectively wait and have it have the same effect. I disagree with Mr. Kiefner that that is the same effect. I think it would delay the beginning of this project for 8 months.
Ms. Bacchus, how much money are we going to be putting into the rainy day fund? I'm blanking on the correct word.
$429,000.
Okay, and the amount of money that has been saved by not spending things is about 600, 750.
934,000.
Yeah, so there is a percentage limit on what we can change within appropriated funds.
The percentage limit applies to within the expenditures. As Ben mentioned, this is solely talking about the revenue sources, so that does not apply.
But these expenditure drivers are included in the excess money that we have.
Nope, the additional appropriation is all from additional revenue sources.
It's entirely
Yep,
from
we did
additional
not
revenue.
touch the expenditures. Yeah,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. So these expenditure drivers are not being reappropriated.
correct.
Okay. Mr. Shaker.
We speak to the second time, for the second time on against this amendment. Again, the Finance Committee recognizes that and has recognized, and this council has recognized that continuing to experience surpluses in excess of $2 million, call it $1.5 million, big numbers. It's not great. Like, it's great, we have this money. It's better than not having the money, certainly. It's better than the opposite, but it's still something that we need to get a better handle on being able to predict. And I think there is, we've given very clear direction to staff to try to figure out in the next budget process how they can better predict some of these areas, at least that we're having consistent, we're experiencing these consistent money that we're receiving, revenue receiving over what we've planned for. I outlined some of the challenges to that, but I think it's something that we've said we really would like to see as a council, and the Finance Committee's asked staff in some detail to look at. However, solving that problem should not come at the expense of funding projects with revenue that we have already received sometime in the last year and a quarter. Just letting that revenue sit there because we haven't solved this problem. It lets perfection get in the way of progress, or improvement get in the way of progress that we need to make. And so I don't support pulling projects out until this problem is solved. I don't think it actually doing that solves anything for ultimately for the people who are paying taxes in this town and using the services that will be improved with these projects.
All right.
I'd like to withdraw my second.
We can just vote on it.
I'll
It's
just leave
okay.
it at that. If I'm allowed to do that.
You are allowed to do that. Is anybody else willing to second Mr. Coleman's motion?
We've already debated it. I'll second it and then vote against it. We should just vote. There's no reason to
Oh,
end this without a vote.
okay. All right. Mr. Shaken replaces Mr. Kiefner as the second on that vote. And I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of Mr. Coleman's motion, please raise your hand. All of those opposed to Mr. Coleman's motion, please raise your hand. All right, it is 7-1. The next item is Mr.
So you
Shaken's
still have to
motion.
vote on the motion, right?
Yes. All those in favor of Mr. Shaken's motion, please raise your hand. And opposed to Mr. Shaken's motion is Mr. Coleman. Thank you. Mr. Shaken's motion passes. This is obviously an item which we will have to discuss in the future. The next on my agenda.
Capital improvement. This is the consent thing.
Oh, yes, right, sorry. So the next item is the capital improvement program adjustments, Mr. Shaken.
Mr. Aylesworth explained this before we got into the other one, so I'm just going to make the motion move effective today to to approve the adjustments to the capital projects fund as presented in your packet.
Is there, oh, you don't need a second. Let's speak to your motion.
It's as the town manager said, when we fund a capital project, we just talked about one for $650,000. We give it a budget and then they do the project, and usually they meet the budget, but sometimes they spend less and sometimes they spend more. And if they spend less, if the project is less expensive than we budgeted for, unless we take action, the money just sits there. It's in a fund that we've created. It's in an account. We have to move it. And so what this does is take areas where projects have been under budget and move money into the accounts that need money to fund their operations. So most of this money is moving into public works and the road resurfacing. There's some accounting procedures essentially around needing to actually account for receiving money from different sources, Leyland for the parking garage, LoSiP grants for road resurfacing, et cetera. But we're essentially taking projects that have been under budget, taking those dollars and repurposing them into other projects that need the funds.
Mr. Coleman.
I just have a clarification question of the four top lines here. Technology infrastructure, schools, MMS renovations. It looks as though 300,000, 304,000, something like that. Is that a surplus from the Board of Education budget? Now you're actually moving this money over into town projects?
If I may, so the Board of Ed, Mansfield Public Schools, Mansfield Board of Ed does not have its own capital budget. Region 19 does. So we, the town, include in our capital budget that goes through the full budget process with the council, any capital requests that the Board of Ed has made. So they are related to Mansfield Board of Ed, but they are not separate Board of Ed like operating funds. These are leftover funds from the capital budget that the town funded, which is inclusive of, because we own the buildings, Board of Ed facilities.
Okay, so none of this is coming from the Board of Ed budget.
No.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the town
sorry.
owns the buildings. So
No. Ryan is incorrect.
It is coming from the Board of Ed budget. The Board of Ed, similar to what the town just did with our year-end transfers, goes through a similar process. And due to vacancy savings, they had, as you said, around $300,000.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So the Board of Ed, I think, had $275,000 surplus, and it was handled in a similar way last year. So we're missing the mark on the Board of Ed budget too. Not only the town budget, but the Board of Ed consistently goes over every year 6 figures. And this is an indication that we could have cut the Board of Ed budget by 300,000 without hurting anything. This is another area that we need to look at.
I apologize. I was focusing on the receiving project. I thought that was where the question came. So not realizing you're talking about where the money is coming from.
Mr. Shaken.
Yeah, so I don't want to speak for the Board of Ed's Finance Committee. I disagree that we should cut the Board of Education budget, and I voted against the motions that Mr. Coleman has made to do so for the last number of years. But I think it illustrates an interesting, their savings are largely also from these vacancy questions. So we've asked in some detail on the Finance Committee, why can't we do a better job predicting these things? And essentially what we've learned is that because we're not so small that when they happen, they're kind of immaterial. We're a big enough organization. We have enough employees between the town and the Board of Ed that when this happens, like, again, people leave, it's a couple of months before you're able to hire to fill their position at best. And that couple of months, you're not paying anybody. And so that's the savings that we're talking about here. It happens in the board, it happens for the town, and similar to the town, the board funds their positions 365 days a year. They fund it starting on July 1st. And when a teacher retires in June and no one's hired again until August, there's a savings. But we aren't big enough, each of our departments individually in town, our maintenance department, our public works department, et cetera, to
predict.
Well, not to predict, but to have the predictions not be volatile, right? So we know we have a fire department with 32 full-time employees. For example, Chief Roach is still here. We know that every year someone goes out on medical leave for a while and takes disability insurance and we don't pay their salary. We know people leave. We know that when we authorize a position on July 1st, it's often not able to be filled for a couple months because they're interviewing, et cetera. But there's only 32 of them. And so if we're off by one or two, we're way off and we've guessed wrong. So if they do a better job by one or two people versus if we were Hartford and we had a fire department with 100 employees, you could be off by one or two and your prediction would still be fluid enough that it would make sense. And the same is true for all of our town departments, which is why we haven't done this kind of guesswork. And I assume why the Board of Ed hasn't done it either. What we've asked Maria to look into is, even though typically you would do this prediction on a department by department basis because people get hurt fighting fires way more frequently than they do in the finance department on their computers. So it's difficult to do it across an organization with people who have different job types, essentially, or it's not something that's typically done across an organization with people with different job types. Nevertheless, the amount of money is significant enough that we were asking her to try to figure out if there's a way that we can do it to essentially create an allowance for vacancies as we budget, so that next year we could say, okay, we have a total staff budget of X million dollars. We're gonna cut 300,000 from it and just know that by the end of the year, we'll have at least $300,000 in vacancies. The risk to this, as Ryan has articulated accurately, is if it doesn't happen, then we as a council, all of us, need to not in October, when it doesn't happen, say, Ryan, how could you possibly have proposed a budget that cut $300,000 that you knew we needed to spend, and now we're short and we have to come up with the money. So that's the trade-off.
Well, there's plenty of wiggle room there. For the last 4 years, we've had a pretty good surplus from the Board of Ed, and it goes back to the town.
Yeah, a lot of that has been unexpected increases in education cost sharing money, though. It hasn't been so much from taxpayer money as it has been from outside sources.
Could you clarify the color coding, if it's a code?
Sure. The first 4 projects are Board of Education projects, as we just discussed. The next 5 projects, which are a light pink, are all fire projects. They close 3 projects that we no longer need and add funding to the Light Rescue 107 replacement, which needed additional funds. The next is a small overage to Depot Campus building. That's the bright pink one. Just a note, if you take the fire projects and that bright pink project, you get a total of $823, which we're requesting comes out of CNR. The yellow projects are projects with external funding sources that the council has not previously authorized. So they will be increases to the budget in and above what we currently have budgeted. And the last page is green projects. These are DPW projects that are getting closed and rolled into road resurfacing.
Okay, thank you. Just one more thing. The second item, the MMS renovations, 184,000, increase appropriation. So does that, am I reading it correctly to think that that was $184,000 more than expected?
So there was a $0 expectation for the Board of Education to pay into the renovation project for MMS. So yes.
You were always going to go, you were always going to fill it
Yes.
with something like that. Okay. Could you please explain the parking garage repairs and maintenance, both lines?
Sure. Based on our agreement with Leland, we are required to allocate a certain amount of our interest income to that project. So that's the first line. And the second line, there is a repair and maintenance calculation that we perform on an annual basis, and they are required to contribute into that fund to fund future repairs and maintenance to our parking garage.
They are required.
Correct.
This is our money or what? I mean,
it's coming to us, yes, from them.
Coming to us.
From LAS, yep.
It's revenue, so if we don't put it in this fund, it just sits in the general fund. We have to put it in this fund in order for us to be able to use it. Well, no, for us to be able to use it for its purpose that it was given to us for, which is garage repairs and maintenance.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this motion?
Mr. Temeko had a question, I thought. That was it.
All right. Have you read the motion, Mr. Shaken? Okay, we have the motion is on the floor to approve the adjustments to the Capital Projects Fund. Any further discussion? Let's have a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those, we are unanimous. The one change will be the clarification in the memo that the money for the middle school cafeteria will come from education funding. All right. Then we are up to Mr. Aylesworth's report. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. A few things to call out from my written report. The region, Mid-Atlantic region through Southern New England, obviously experienced a nor'easter storm event over the holiday weekend. Fortunately, Mansfield experienced very limited property damage or loss of power. There were obviously some gusty wind conditions, and that contributed to, as we all know, we have a lot of dead and dying trees in town. I believe at sort of the high water mark, there were roughly 250 Eversource customers without power, but those interruptions in power were relatively short-lived, and Eversource crews were able to get power restored to those customers who had lost it relatively swiftly. I think in all cases, the same day or within the same 24-hour period it went out. And then likewise, only a small handful of town roads had to be temporarily closed due to trees that had fallen on wires and obstructions in the road. So all things considered, given what was forecast and the possible storm impacts we were looking at a few days prior, things worked out relatively favorably. Obviously, not to make light of any particular individual or property owner that maybe suffered a little bit more damage than others. I want to make sure the council is aware or remembers Maria and I, we're going to be in Tampa for the ICMA annual conference later this month, and there is a council meeting taking place while we are gone. And so in our collective absence, because typically Maria in her role as Chief of Shared Services Administration would be serving as the presiding a council meeting if I wasn't available, Mr. Carrington, our Director of Public Works, will serve as my proxy. And I want to say proxy because I'm not designated an acting town manager. I will still be the town manager. I will just be the town manager of Mansfield while I'm in Tampa, but I will not be participating in that evening's council meeting. And so Mr. Carrington will be here as he did for a couple different stints in my absence.
He will be delighted.
Yeah, he can't wait. I'm sure that's exactly what he's thinking. I know the council's already aware of this because we shared the information out when we got the news, and then also as part of the town bi-monthly newsletter that went out on October 1st. But just to reemphasize, we are ecstatic that Sustainable CT just rolled out gold level certification as an option, this new higher level designation this past year. And so the first opportunity we had is we came up for our every 3-year recertification. We got confirmation that we have achieved gold level certification. And so that's a testament to a lot of hard work and commitment and the values of our town, but certainly the work of staff and volunteers and community members who have really championed our sustainability practices. And of course, that's not just sustainability the way a lot of us think about it in terms of environmental responsibility, but social and economic values as well. And so unfortunately, because it does coincide with the ICMA annual conference later this month, but the Sustainable CT annual awards ceremony is going to be taking place on October 28th. I believe the mayor and others are going to be going to represent Mansfield well at that event. So very excited about that and what it means and what it represents for our community and our values. So this is sort of teasing something that really, aside from the idea initiation, we have not implemented it yet, so I don't have much more to say. But you look around at communities across, the nation, but certainly in Connecticut, more emphasis on video content. And I don't mean professionally produced video content, but video content, short bursts, short vignettes, if you will, that the general public can relate to. serviceable for social media. This is having a much higher impact, research is showing, much higher impact on belief in the information people are getting, their retention, their level of support for things. The town of Plainville is probably our best example in the state. We're on a very limited budget. They are hitting home run after home run on a number of different fronts, and so we're going to try to go down this path here in Mansfield. We're very fortunate that we have an employee in Mansfield Public Library that has been doing videos. Anybody who follows Mansfield Public Library on Facebook has seen any number of not just informational videos that have been produced, but they have a high entertainment value. They would capture your interest. And so we're going to try to tap into his talents, as it were, and start producing some videos spanning the whole array of municipal departments and operations. And so we're kind of starting off with a short list of projects and priorities that we know we have, not the least of which we've talked a little bit about tonight, the animal shelter, and helping to introduce people to that area of need in both a way that's informational, but also fun. A few other things this past week, Maria and I, we accepted invitations. Connecticut State Police invited municipal officials from across Eastern Connecticut to a session, a forum, if you will, on the resident trooper program that was hosted at Eastern Connecticut State University. I think every council member knows that we have by far and away the largest resident trooper program in terms of headcount in the state. So most of the people that were there with us, they may have one or two troopers. We're a bit of an outlier in terms of the fact that we have 10, including a sergeant, and have been trying to get to 13, but it was a really good forum for us to ask a lot of questions, get answers, but also for them to show us. It's kind of in its beta form right now, but state police will be rolling out a much more user-friendly, comprehensive database on calls. And so you can pull up real-time data, search for different types of calls. It's relatively geographically specific information. Like, it's not physical address, but it shows you kind of like a heat map. So you can see exactly, like what part of town calls are happening. And without belaboring this too much, I think council knows when we were trying to kind of go through the process of understanding what additional people power we might need, we asked the Connecticut State Police really to help us with their own data, make the case for the need, and their response has been, you can submit an FOI request and maybe we'll get around to providing that information. So this will allow us to basically obtain necessary data, analyze necessary data in a much more real-time fashion, very complete. And so based on what they showed us, it seems like it's going to be a phenomenal tool once it's sort of officially launched, which is not too far off, is our understanding. Just a couple more things. Obviously, we have the November elections coming up, municipal elections this year, because it's an odd number year. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that early voting is going to kick off on October 20th, and there's going to be 2 locations for that. Council chamber, where we're sitting now, but also, again, the Yukon bookstore, and a lot of information on the town's website, in particular the registrar section of the website, with all sorts of questions and useful answers on early voting and the elections in general, different ways that people can cast their vote this year if they're unable to register ahead of time, which the deadline is this Friday to register kind of a conventional ahead of time and vote in person. A few updates from the library, or one big update from the library. Mansfield Public Library recently launched an initiative to a contest, if you will, to design its next library card. So it's going to be a fun contest. The winning art design, there's basically 3 different age groups, and so people can submit by age group, and the cards are going to be available in 2026. And it's also going to be one of the ways that the library is participating in the America 250 Connecticut 250 celebration that's coming up next year. So, and it's a contest open to anyone with a Mansfield Public Library card. And so help spreading the word on this contest is greatly appreciated. For Parks and Rec, a couple different RFQs, requests for qualifications, have been issued relative to the planning and design services related to improvements at Southeast Park, Sunny Acres Park, and a envision new dog park for Mansfield. Some of this work is focused on ADA compliance and accessibility upgrades, which is obviously something we've been talking a lot about. Was part of the master planning process as well when we did that for Parks and Rec. Want to make sure people know that the Mansfield Human Services Season of Giving campaign is officially launched, and there's multiple avenues for residents to support local families in need, including the well-loved Sponsor a Family program and a number of other opportunities, and not the least of which is a comedy fundraiser that the department's hosting this Friday. You can still purchase tickets if you're interested and available to attend. It's going to be in the ballroom in the Elks Lodge in Willimantic, and there's more details online how you can purchase tickets to support our various community assistance programs. And just a couple more updates. Last week was Fire Prevention Week, so personnel in our Mansfield Fire and Emergency Services Department were making the rounds at our schools and early childhood development care centers, and just the presentations very well received. And I know for one, I had a kindergartner come home asking me a lot of pointed questions about what our plan was, what we were going to do in the event of a fire in the house. So it's just, yep. So that's great. Definitely the message was received by one 5-year-old, no joke. And otherwise, I'm not going to go through play by play, but I know there was some expressed interest. Council members had questions, I think, on the heels of the last meeting on a couple different fronts. One, just where things stood in terms of the remainder of the project work that has to be done for the South Eagleville Road Route 275 pedestrian improvement project. So I provided more information. Again, the whole project schedule is a little fluid, so this isn't meant to be literal in terms of a day-by-day breakdown, but it gives you a sense of the work that remains and the timing which we expect it to happen. And then also there was a question about the signalization project at the intersection of South Eagleville Road and Separatist Road. And this is a DOT project. The project was originally expected to be completed last December, so December 24. But there were some issues that the DOT shared with the town related to procurement. I think in particular issues with the signal mast arms and equipment. And so right now they're expecting completion in January of 26. So basically 1 year delayed from when it was originally expected to be complete. And I think I will end my report there.
Mr. Shaken.
Tell me more about this Parks and Rec RFQ specifically. Where's the dog park? And what improvements are we talking about at Southeast and Sunny Acres?
So I'd have to, and I'll be happy to go back through. It's been weeks since I originally provided my own feedback on the RFQs for the two parks. So I'll have to share back out with the council and to refresh my own memory some of the specific ADA access improvements for those facilities, and I'll pull them from the RFQ and summarize them for the town. But the dog park, part of the scope of work is to look at suitable sites. So that is in fact part. So we're not going into it with a specific proposed site in mind.
And then just from your memory, if you remember for the other two parks for Southeast and Sunny Acres, is this just ADA accessibility improvements that we're talking about, or are we looking at other improvements to those two facilities? So I know at Sunny Acres, like
Right,
connecting our ADA
yeah.
playground to more just to somewhere that someone who's in a wheelchair can actually access it is an important part of the project there. But I'm talking specifically about like the state of the ball fields at Southeast, which is essentially the extent of that park and the facilities there. And like the fact that the one that's nice doesn't drain for a week. It rained on Sunday. I guarantee you it won't be playable by Saturday. So things like that. There's improvements to the facility outside of ADA. I'm just curious if that's part of it.
Yeah, I know the accessibility improvements was the focus of a lot of it. I will have to go back to the RFQ and identify other things outside accessibility improvements. I'll need to jog my memory.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I would really encourage members of the council to attend the comedy festival and to make donations to the holiday fund. I mean, this is one of the things that that really makes a difference in this community for individual families and for individual children. And there are lots of ways to contribute, but money is the big one. So I would hope that there's some representation for the council. Both Mr. Shaken and I have other obligations that night. So I
I
would,
think you're trying to say we don't laugh enough.
well, that's absolutely true. In any case, I'm thinking more about donating money, I think, but laughing more is always a good idea. Yes. Oh, good for you. Mr. Temeko has purchased a table for that. So, any other questions or comments? Mr. Kiefner and I will both be at the Sustainability Conference, Connecticut Sustainability, and very happy to accept the Gold Award on behalf of the town. Anything else? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Aylesworth. So much information in your report as usual.
If I could, Mayor, and I want to review this more closely, but just I did pull up the RFQ, and so ADA improvements, ADA accessibility, definitely the focus, as I stated. It appears though for Sunny Acres and Southeast, other elements for the conceptual design development that are called out relate to incorporating low maintenance, cost-effective solutions and sustainable landscaping where feasible, and proposing opportunities to enhance connectivity to adjacent trails, schools, and neighborhoods. So those are other design elements which in many ways could dovetail with ADA accessibility improvements. Oh, I'm sorry, and I skipped over one. Consider design alternatives for repurposing or upgrading outdated or underutilized facilities.
I would just encourage, as you look at any of these projects, these included, that you take a spin around the existing place, and as you're doing improvements, make sure that there aren't things that are not currently working in those facilities that you're not just leaving out. And so in the case of ball fields, in this case, baseball and softball, but if we look at Lions for soccer, and Sunny Acres as well, like you should talk to the people who use the fields, like the Little League, and find out if they're having issues. I know for a fact that our baseball field literally doesn't drain. I don't know why, but figuring out how to get the puddles off the field without people with kitty litter for 6 hours and literally shop vacs on Saturday mornings, vacuuming off water from the infield when it's rained like 4 days ago, is probably an important thing to address before or as we are doing the other improvements. So I'm not suggesting we like make it Augusta National, but it should be usable for the people who are going to play the games that the people who need ADA accessibility are going to come and watch.
Okay, thank you. Reports and comments of council members. I think I have said my piece on this. Does anybody else have a report or comment? Mr. Coleman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Back on March 10th of 2025, the council voted to appropriate $500,000 for the new bathhouse at Bicentennial Pond. At that time, I didn't have all the information in front of me. Mr. Kiefner had requested a design, and the design was shared with the council. That design shocked me, along with the price. I guess I wasn't paying attention back in March, but with the information that I had, I decided to tour the facility. Mr. Ellsworth was kind enough to have staff open it up for me. The present facility has 4 toilets in it, well, 3 toilets and 1 urinal, more than enough to supply toilets for anybody that uses the park. I shared the state statutes on that as well. I took the liberty to go around and look at the facilities at Columbia Lake, Coventry Lake, Bolton Lake, Andover Lake, and Case City State Park. Our present facility is far better than anything I've seen out there. And Given the information that I know now, I am absolutely shocked that this proposal ever came to being. This is a very grandiose bathhouse. It'd be something at Lake Tahoe, maybe, or maybe the Greenwich Yacht Club. I mean, this expenditure is, it's pure pork. It's a pet project. It's not something that I am willing to support any longer now that I have the information in front of me, and I would like to make a motion.
What is your motion, Mr. Coleman?
Move effective October 14th, 2025 to cease all funding and work related to the Bicentennial Pond Bathhouse Project.
Madam Mayor, that motion, point of order, that motion's out of order. The item's not on our agenda this evening.
I can make a point of order.
The only way to make it on our agenda is to put it on the agenda.
Which Mayor is the motion that Mr. Coleman needs to make to precede his motion. That's the order that my point is.
I understand. Mr. Coleman, do you want to add it to?
I'll make a motion to add it to the agenda under new business. What are we up to? E?
ACDE. I would suggest that you put it on the agenda between reports of council members and reports of council committees. We can't really go back in time.
Yeah.
Go ahead and make your motion.
I move to make the motion or to move it onto the agenda.
The motion to move it onto the agenda.
I'd like to move to add it to the agenda.
And it being?
It being the bathhouse, to cease all funding on the bathhouse.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Kiefner seconds.
Okay.
All those in favor of adding this motion to the agenda, please raise your hand. All those opposed to adding it to the agenda, please raise your hand. The motion fails. I'm sorry, this is something you'll have to bring up at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments of council committees, council members, Mr. Temeko?
Two things. I had the opportunity to talk with a lot of residents recently, and there is a real problem with speeding in the town, in particular on Codfish Falls Road from Crowleyville over to 44. We have a problem there. I don't know if how to solve it, but and I've witnessed it, and I spoke to 6 residents that brought it up separately. And then number 2, I also had the opportunity to enjoy the Lions Club Pavilion, and the roof is starting to come down on the pavilion over there. There's a spot. Were you able to take a look at that, or do we have that on the agenda pretty soon?
So the replacing the roof in the pavilion you're talking about has been funded with the capital. There's a capital appropriation for that, so it's just a matter of getting the work completed. So it is a funded project.
Do you have a time frame?
I would have to get with facilities to see where it kind of sits in their queue, but soon in the grand scheme of things.
Within months or years?
I mean, I would hope to be a next construction season at the latest project. But if there's additional deterioration beyond when the conditions warranting the roof replacement were originally documented, I think for the last budget season, certainly have staff go out and take a fresh look to see if it needs to be expedited, because it is funded.
Thank you.
Maybe just they need a remedial
right
in a couple of spots.
Right, there might be a stopgap.
It can go for a while
before full replacement is done. Perhaps that might be an option.
Mr. Aylesworth, will you comment on the problem on Codfish Falls Road? We've received several communications about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can say I think it's sort of universally recognized. I know it's an ongoing conversation that we have at traffic authority meetings, as well as conversations that I have with Sergeant King, that speeding, traffic enforcement is a major area of concern. I certainly don't want to be glib about it, but there are definitely times, well, I'll put it this way. I said that Ms. Capriola and I were at this meeting that Connecticut State Police organized with area towns in the resident trooper program this past week. I asked them at one point, their leadership there, if Connecticut State Police still enforce speeding, if that's a thing, and waited for their response. They kind of looked at me, what do you mean? I said, well, I've been the town manager in Mansfield for 5 years, and I don't know that I've ever seen anybody pulled over for speeding. That might be a little hyperbolic. It's not enormously so. So there's definitely a recognition that there's a lack of enforcement, not so much a lack of interest in enforcing as much as I think it comes down to a combination perhaps of some concerns. State police have since acknowledged, changes with like the Police Accountability Act and enforcing speeding, but also when we talk about the need to staff up, this is one of the specific areas of need that we identified, because I know, Sergeant King would be able to speak to it in more detail, but at any given moment in time, the people that are on shift that are doing police work, they are, oftentimes tied up investigating, substantial crimes or things of that nature that doesn't allow for them to be out. But I know that every opportunity they get, they go to areas where there have been reports of excess speeds, and they do try to have a presence there to address that. We've done speed feedback signs that we deploy. I think what we have at our disposal, we are using, recognizing that there's not one problem area in town. There's several, and limited bandwidth to do that. But this is a real area of need that, frankly, we struggle with capacity right now.
Has there been any serious discussion about speed cameras?
Well, I say serious discussion. I know it's come up a couple times. I think the council, this was broached at a council meeting, and I think it's a tool or an instrument available. I think it would largely come down to, I think, also a question of what the council is comfortable doing as a policy decision.
Mr. Shaken?
I have two questions. One, related to the Connecticut State Police, we've had a conversation with them, with our local troopers, about enforcement on town roads versus on state roads. And I certainly see my fair share of troopers, whether they're conducting active speed enforcement or whether they're doing paperwork visibly on the side of the road, so people slow down when they see a trooper, parked along the state roads in Mansfield, and along Route 6 in Mansfield, whether that's a resident trooper or not, I don't know. Very much doing active speed enforcement on the highway, but with a couple of exceptions, maybe right around when that conversation happened, do not see that happening on some of the back roads, which admittedly I'm traversing less frequently. So that's the kind of nuance. Clearly, Connecticut State Police still does speed enforcement in the state of Connecticut on our highways as an agency, but the question of whether the resident
the issuing of tickets, even on state roads, though, when you look at the data, is pretty thin. But once you get off state roads, it's.
I will say, I as someone who got very close to an incredibly serious car accident from someone who was evading a traffic stop from one of our troopers, I'm not completely mad at the fact that this isn't something that's happening with some frequency anymore. I mean, very, very close. It was pretty dangerous. So there's some kind of traffic enforcement that is definitely happening. I think the question is whether it's happening on our back roads. My second question is, even if it were, or even if we installed a fixed point speed camera, as some communities have done, I think studies are also showing that those things don't have any effect on speed, except in the one spot where the camera is, where everyone knows to slow down, and that everyone immediately speeds right back up again. And so I guess my question is, do we have information about other things besides, active trooper-led speed enforcement, capacity issues aside, that has an effect? We've done some of the your speed is too fast signs, and those have an impact. But are there other things that other communities have done that are working that we could try that might not involve as much active enforcement when we don't have the ability or capacity to do it everywhere all the time?
That would require a more comprehensive response, which I'm happy to try to coordinate. I think that a lot of what we're seeing, I don't think it's unique to Mansfield. I think unfortunately it's sort of a reflection on society and very troubling driving behavior in general, a lot of distracted driving. So it definitely goes beyond our borders. And that's not to say that we don't obviously have a responsibility to do everything that we can here to improve upon our situation, but it is a daunting challenge.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing nobody, we will move on to council committees. Finance, do you have
Nothing else from what was on our agenda tonight.
personnel? Anybody have personnel? We will go into executive session shortly and you'll get our report. Committee on committees?
We had some items that were approved on the consent agenda. I just want to say, as we've concluded our 2-year stint, thanks to Sarah Ann, who's been an invaluable asset to the committee in moving things along. I just want to express our appreciation.
Glad to hear that. Thank you. Okay, petitions, requests, and communications. We've seen that. We will add,
I have one question.
Yeah.
Did anybody contact Mr. Burnham? I know we were just discussing only, but did anybody contact him?
I believe the response, I'll double check, but I think the response was that it was being shared with our resident trooper and it was being put on the agenda for our next traffic authority meeting where we talk about integrated traffic safety response, including speeding.
Thank you.
May I ask, following up on Mr. Coleman's point, that and the way I took it was, has anybody responded to him? Have we acknowledged his concern directly rather than we told him that it's going to be discussed?
Well,
Is that what you're saying,
that's
too?
what I'm saying. I
Is that
believe
all
that would be
we're
our practice was when somebody reaches out with a concern. In this case, speeding particular area, I would respond to if it worked the way it was supposed to. If that came into the town manager's office, either myself or one of the other people that check the general town manager inbox would respond to that individual saying, acknowledging receipt. This is
Great,
being
okay.
added to the agenda for the traffic authority
Thank
meeting
you.
on such and such a date,
It
et
was the
cetera.
acknowledging receipt that I wanted to make sure happened.
okay, for future agendas, we will add Mr. Coleman's request on the bathhouse. And I think that concludes our open agenda. So the next item would be to go into executive session. Mr. Shaken?
This is just us, right?
Yes.
Move we enter an
Well,
exec.
let me say what I would like to do is to have initially just us, and once we've discussed the draft, which I have already shared with Mr. Aylesworth, that we call him back into the room.
So I'd like to move we enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, Section 1-206A, to discuss the town manager performance review, and that we invite town manager Aylesworth to that executive session when we feel like it.
Is there a second? Ms. Cotton seconds. All those in favor say, raise your hand. All right, we are in executive session. We will reconvene in 5 minutes.
So anticipation of this. This